Rare stands before an endless skeleton army, freshly announced as a newborn demon lord, and declares the time has finally come to face the humans. Standing beside her monstrous companions, including a towering dragon and a massive white wolf, Rare's group now stands at war with the entire human race. Surrounded by countless skeleton soldiers raising weapons under pouring rain, Rare smiles with blood on her face, asking if everyone is ready to fight. Long before that moment, an ordinary girl named Leah lives quietly at home, surrounded by companion robots, in a world reliant on virtual reality. While browsing through her options one evening, Leah discovers early access to an open beta for a brand new MMORPG called Boot Hour, Shoot Curse. As her full body scan finishes inside the tunnel, Leah learns the game resembles an ordinary fantasy RPG, yet has no levels or professions. After selecting the elf race, Leah watches her available points shrink from automatic traits like albinism and reduced beauty, registering herself under the name Rare. Studying her character screen further, Rare notices certain drawback traits, such as poor eyesight and albinism, actually grant bonus experience points, instead of pure weakness. Deciding to lean fully into the disadvantage, Rare happily accepts her flawed build, ending up with a total of 110 available experience points. She learns most players spawn inside human-controlled nations, immediately facing a subjugation force if they choose monstrous races like goblins or skeletons instead. To avoid that danger entirely, Rare discovers a separate spawning location hidden deep within monster territory, far away from human eyes and human weapons. Emerging inside a narrow stone cave, clearly built for skeletons, Rare realizes her albinism at least protects her from sunburn, despite her poor eyesight. Confused after finishing an unusually long tutorial, Rare learns the system treats players and NPCs identically, showing no distinction between monsters and non-player characters. Touching the cave wall thoughtfully, Rare wonders if this system design encourages players to treat NPCs with consideration, instead of killing them without reason. Hearing distant voices nearby, Rare quietly spies on a group of cat-like beastkin sharing a meal, until one announces she must relieve herself nearby. Startled by Rare's sudden appearance near the tree, the beastkin girl reacts instantly, striking out in alarm the moment she notices the unfamiliar figure. Taking advantage of her opponent's hesitation, Rare presses the attack aggressively, insisting that any shaken enemy must be finished off without holding back at all. The sudden commotion draws her companion's attention, who scream out Carrie's name in panic as the fight escalates violently between Rare and the beastkin. Furious over her friend being harmed, another beastkin girl named Marion charges forward, calling Rare a bastard while unleashing a burst of magical energy. Despite Marion's desperate attack, Rare overpowers her completely, gripping her tightly as the violent clash ends decisively in the elf's favor once again. Rare exhales in relief, noting that her weak status still worked fine as a newbie, thanks to martial arts she had learned back home. Lying on the ground after acquiring 300 experience points, Rare watches the beastkin leader stir, wondering aloud if these small fries were bandits. Rare realizes that killed NPCs apparently never respawn again, deciding these bandit girls could still prove useful instead of being discarded entirely. Introducing herself calmly as Rare, an elf, she asks the fallen beastkin girl who her leader is, offering to let that leader speak first. Carrie snaps back rudely, questioning Rare's manners, only for Rare to counter sharply, asking if her mother never taught her to speak properly either. Carrie apologizes, admitting her parents never taught her proper speech, so Rare suggests using a gentler phrase and switching to the word you instead. Rare asks Carrie why she and her friends are living out here, warning that cooperating now would spare her from further unnecessary trouble later. Carrie explains their village had fallen into ruin from the spreading monster territory, so the adults decided to sell the children, forcing them to flee. To survive afterward, Carrie admits they resorted to stealing from nearby villages, killing anyone who noticed them in order to stay alive themselves. Roaming the forest for 5 years while avoiding other people's eyes, the group finally stumbled upon this very cave just that same morning. Rare admits she expected a sad story, marveling internally at how such a detailed background could exist for what seemed like a simple NPC. Watching normal townsfolk elsewhere, Rare wonders if this world truly counts as an AI simulator anymore, deciding to focus her attention on these girls. First, Rare tells Carrie she understands their circumstances, and that they had done their best, admitting it would feel wasteful to kill them purely for experience points. She warns Carrie firmly that continuing their current lifestyle would eventually cost them everything. Leaving the stunned beastkin girls silent under her serious gaze, Rare asks if they truly never considered another path, growing alarmed when Carrie reveals they have nowhere else to sleep in any village. Carrie explains that as bandits, they cannot live among ordinary people, prompting Rare to offer teaching them how the world and experience system actually works. Hers later, the girls praise Rare enthusiastically, amazed by her strength and kindness, remarking that the explanation alone somehow took a full 5 hours. Surrounded by the delighted Beastkin girls, Rare shrugs off their praise, insisting she simply enjoys explaining things and isn't particularly kind at all. Carrie shares that back in the village, she used to get beaten for asking questions she didn't understand. Unlike Rare's patient explanations, convinced now of her kindness, the girls nod along as one begs Rare, addressing her respectfully as Miss Rare of the elf race. Carrie begs Rare to become their boss, but an error message appears, stating the required subordinate skill has not been learned yet. Startled by this response, Rare wonders if she can even tame a humanoid NPC, since Carrie technically isn't classified as a monster. Rare asks herself whether any other player since the closed beta has ever heard of a skill capable of taming, guessing only a handful would know. Carrie assumes the silence means rejection, but Rare clarifies she doesn't mind becoming their boss. She just needs time to think something through. Noticing Carrie forgot to eat, Rare gently reminds her before opening up her own skill list to search for possible answers. Scanning through the massive skill tree, Rare admits she cannot find the subordinate skill listed anywhere within her current available options. Rare theorizes the taming skill might only appear after combining other skills with similar manipulative effects on an opponent's will. She considers whether mental magic could be the key, since that tree eventually unlocks a control skill, after acquiring Stupefy, Charm, and Fear. However, Rare realizes reaching control through the mental magic tree would cost at least 150 experience points at minimum. She also considers Necromancy, Discipline, and Summon as strong alternatives, though none of those 3 skills actually contain any skill tree inside them. Thinking further about the word subordinate, Rare wonders if Necromancy's ability to bind souls might relate to it directly instead. Yet Necromancy also lacks its own skill tree, leaving Discipline, Summon, and Alchemy looking related but equally unclear in their true purpose. Deciding to test her theory directly, Rare reaches out and acquires Summon, Discipline, and Necromancy all at once, spending 60 experience points total. Staying calm despite the uncertainty, Rare reasons that being a specialized mental magician still holds value, even if her guess turns out wrong. Calculating further, she realizes adding control on top of Stupefy, Charm, and Fear would grant all 4 skills for exactly 150 points. A hidden skill called Bind Soul suddenly appears within Necromancy, revealing that certain skills require specific unlock conditions to become visible. Realizing this pattern, Rare concludes that whatever she truly needs is probably locked behind yet another hidden skill somewhere nearby. A new skill called Contract appears under Summon, letting her forge pacts with summoned souls, hinting that something bigger might unlock next. Moments later, the subordinate skill finally appears beneath Discipline, and Rare triumphantly declares she has found exactly what she needed. A prompt confirms that Carrie can now be tamed, and Rare smiles confidently before pressing yes without any hesitation at all. Carrie watches nervously as Rare finally returns, who smiles warmly and apologizes for keeping her waiting through such a lengthy explanation process. Rare confidently declares that given the immense experience cost involved, she must certainly be the only player currently possessing this rare taming skill. Grinning wickedly down at Carrie, Rare announces that from this moment forward, she is truly their boss, both in name and reality. Surrounded by her newly tamed beastkin subordinates, Rare leads the group forward together, ready to explore whatever challenges await them next. Smiling confidently with her hidden skill finally secured, Rare declares it is time to begin, asking her new companions if they're ready to go. With her subordinate skill fully activated, Rare had bound every bandit before her, and the system flashed confirmation that the named enemy group now lay defeated. Strange new sensations flooded through the Cat Sisters as stolen memories surfaced, revealing just how formidable the bosses they once feared had truly been. What should we even do from here? Carrie wondered aloud, while beside her Rare quietly weighed how she might gauge the real strength of her subordinates. Beneath darkening trees the group wandered together, laughter rising as the girls compared how soft and shiny their fur had grown since meeting Rare. Confusion crossed one girl's face when she asked about the sudden hunting trip, until her companion reminded her that Rare had ordered it earlier. Without warning, Carrie barked a command to halt, her instincts flaring dangerously as Rare, still thinking, considered whether raising intelligence might sharpen her tactics. Blood and wolves lingered heavy in the air, Carrie admitted, and though Riley proposed striking first, a calm refusal settled the matter instead. Towering suddenly above them, a massive white wolf revealed itself, and Rare's shocked cry rang out just as the pack realized their position had been found. Every own go, Carrie shouted as the beast lunged forward, and determination sharpened across every face while old battle instincts kicked back into motion. Steel gripped firmly in hand, Carrie, their fierce melee leader, vowed that this fight against the wolf would end swiftly under her blade. Meanwhile, Remy readied her bow, her hybrid combat style, allowing her to shift between front and rear support whenever the chaos demanded it. Farther back, Riley's enhanced vision locked on to the wolf, her Hawkeye ability letting arrows fly true even from a considerable safer distance. Silent and unseen, Marion crept closer, her heightened smell and hidden presence working together to unsettle the enemy before it noticed her. A thunderous clash erupted as Riley's arrow met the wolf head-on, and Carrie's alarmed shout cut through the shower of shattered debris behind them. Rare decided the moment had come to test her own abilities, choosing first to reinforce her mental stat with saved experience. Another lunge from the wolf was suddenly stopped cold when Rare's stupefy took hold, her voice ordering the girls to pull back immediately. No resistance remained in the creature now, and under Rare's steady hand, the taming process finished successfully through her subordinate skill. Compliments passed between the girls over their efforts, yet Rare simply noted to herself how smoothly her mental magic had overwhelmed even a hostile foe. Certain the girls had earned experience alongside her. Rare checked the records, only to freeze when Carrie's status displayed a stunning 0. Staring at the diagram before her, Rare questioned whether her skill alone had swallowed every point Carrie and the others should have gained. When Carrie mentioned the wolf had hunted a boar, Rare offered to carry the meat herself, then watched it vanish instantly into her hidden inventory. Astonished by the disappearing meat, Carrie demanded an explanation, while Rare struggled to describe an invisible bag accessed through a strange touchable system called inventory. Confused mumbling followed as Rare admitted she had simply been discussing game mechanics with an NPC, leaving Carrie completely unable to grasp the concept. Following the wolf's guidance, the group arrived at a massive den, and Carrie compared it favorably to the cramped cave she once called home. Countless wolves emerged together, revealing that their guide had never truly been alone, and Rare stared wide-eyed at the sheer size of the pack. Delighted by the discovery, Rare declared the entire pack now belonged to her family, then gasped upon realizing she could tame every wolf simultaneously. Noticing none of the wolves carried names, Rare decided cheerfully that she would personally name each one while showering them with affectionate praise. One by one, she christened them Jinka, Hakuma, Zarame, Kogome, Hyu, Fubuki, Arare, and Mizor, then asked if any wolves remained hidden nearby. A sudden question about buddies led to shock when an enormous ant appeared, prompting frantic orders from Rare to capture the creature before it escaped. Blocking the only exit with a hail of arrows, the wolves trapped the ant, while Carrie questioned what use its impenetrable shell could possibly serve. Confidently declaring her intentions, Rare explained that taming the ant could provide a base and strengthen everyone's overall combat effectiveness going forward. Frustrated that its hard shell kept her at a distance, Rare decided instead to channel the experience gained from Hakuma into something more useful. Suddenly granting Marion a brand new magical skill, Rare watched her subordinate startle in disbelief, just as Carrie shouted a warning about the ant's attack. Reacting instantly to the danger, Marion raised her hand while the ant lunged forward, its sharp mandibles snapping dangerously close to her position. A powerful blast erupted from Marion's fingertips, freezing the ant solid, and the other girls gasped at witnessing such unexpected magical strength. Trembling with excitement, Marion questioned whether this newfound power actually belonged to Rare, unaware that her intelligence stat had just been dramatically raised. Grinning proudly, Rare confirmed she had boosted Marion's intelligence, curious whether her subordinate now understood what she had been attempting all along. Eager to continue improving her companions, Rare promised magic and greater powers to anyone willing to work hard and earn her favor. Regretting her earlier choice, Rare admitted she should have granted fire magic instead, since defrosting the frozen ant now seemed unexpectedly troublesome. Interrupting the conversation, Carrie asked to test her own abilities, questioning aloud whether the ant's frozen condition would actually matter for her attempt. After training her subordinates for weeks, Rare noticed Carrie's analysis had grown sharper than expected, confirming that raising intelligence stats truly reshaped how her monsters thought and reasoned. Encouraged by Carrie's insight, Rare raised her hand and activated Subordinate again, eager to test whether her clan could recruit another powerful creature hiding nearby. On-air message flashed instantly, revealing that the targeted infantry ant already belonged to another master, meaning a hidden queen commanded the swarm from somewhere unseen close by. Realizing the danger, her subordinates protested loudly, insisting she needed protection before entering such a hostile nest. Yet Rare decided to slip into the narrow passage completely alone. Left behind, Carrie, Kuro, Marion, and Hakuto argued over who should accompany her, each offering a different skill, from enhanced hearing to ice magic, hoping to prove their worth. Their bickering escalated, until every subordinate except the oversized Hakoma squeezed through the tunnel together, crowding Rare from behind since everyone refused to let their leader go in alone. Once inside the cramped tunnel, one subordinate sensed movement, warning that countless ants were closing in fast, prompting Rare to calmly instruct Marion to prepare her freezing magic. Ambush erupted as ants swarmed from every direction, but Rare refused to retreat, declaring she intended to strike every ant at once before their numbers overwhelmed the group. Using her charm skill on the swarming insects, Rare handed command to Marion, trusting her icy magic completely, while the loyal subordinate accepted the responsibility without hesitation. Marion unleashed her freezing spell across the tunnel, encasing the massive ant and its scattered swarm in solid ice, while the rest of the party watched the attack unfold. The tunnel became a frozen graveyard of ants, and once the chaos settled, the group regrouped, wondering whether the elusive queen still remained hidden somewhere deeper within the ruins. A sudden shriek echoed through the darkness as something massive stirred nearby, unsettling Marion and Kuro, whose expressions turned uneasy as the eerie clicking sounds grew steadily louder. Rare stood face to face with the towering queen, its jagged armor gleaming ominously, as her subordinates braced themselves to see whether her skills could conquer this formidable boss. Refusing to let her first attack go to waste, Rare pressed forward with Stupefy immediately followed by Control, hoping the combination would finally subdue the towering queen. Both skills failed against the creature's stubborn resistance, shocking Rare completely since her mental magic had never been resisted so easily by anything within the game before. Explaining that her mental magic needed time to recharge, Rare called out to Carrie and the others, urging them to buy her precious seconds against the queen. Realizing the cavern offered enough space, Rare summoned Hakuma and Ginka instantly, commanding both loyal wolves to hold the dangerous queen back with everything they had. The wolves lunged fearlessly at the armored insect, clashing violently while the rest of the party scrambled through falling debris to keep their formation from collapsing entirely. As Hakuma bit down hard on the queen's leg, Rare confirmed her cooldown had finally ended, preparing to attempt Stupefy and Control against the weakened enemy again. This time the skill successfully took hold, and Rare pushed her advantage further, insisting the creature accept her subordinate contract before its resistance could return. AAA system message confirmed the Vespoid queen had been tamed completely, prompting Rare to introduce her newest subordinate to the rest of the surprised, curious group. After some thought, Rare decided on a fitting name, declaring firmly that the enormous insect would now be known permanently among her ranks as Shigaru. Grateful for the victory, the group asked Rare to teach them how to use inventory, the useful storage function she had unlocked earlier during their journey. Rare demonstrated the concept, describing an invisible bag that let items move in and out freely, though Kuro struggled visibly to grasp the strange mechanic. Suddenly Jinka managed to activate the function by instinct, shocking everyone present as an item vanished mysteriously from sight before their disbelieving eyes. Confused by this discovery, Rare realized the system apparently made no distinction between players, NPCs, and monsters regarding special functions like inventory access. To everyone's surprise, Hakuma and Marion also managed to activate their own inventory almost immediately after hearing Rare's explanation, without any noticeable difficulty at all. Yet Carrie and 3 others couldn't replicate the same result, leaving the group puzzled about what exact difference separated the successful subordinates from the rest. Determined to help, Rare called Carrie over privately, promising to boost her stats slightly, so she could finally use the same convenient function. With her intelligence raised, Carrie successfully activated inventory on her next attempt, cheering loudly with genuine excitement over her long-awaited personal achievement. Confirming her theory, Rare concluded that high intelligence was the true requirement for NPCs to unlock inventory, then had Carrie teach the remaining members. Carrie successfully passed the knowledge to another subordinate, proving NPCs could teach each other directly, before the group turned toward Shigaru for the same lesson. Shigaru managed to learn inventory despite lacking speech, though the language barrier made real communication with her noticeably difficult for the rest of the team. Wishing they had some way to communicate across distances, Rare wondered aloud whether telepathy existed, while Kuro asked if anything useful was actually available already. Realizing NPCs might already have access, Rare excitedly asked Shigaru to add her to a friends list, determined to check whether friend chat truly worked. Suddenly remembering she had never actually added anyone before, Rare panicked slightly, admitting she hadn't met a single player since starting her journey through the game. Learning that registration required a friend's card pulled from inventory, Rare grasped the simple exchange process, comparing it casually to swapping ordinary business cards. Following the instructions carefully, Rare handed her card to Shigaru, watching closely as the massive insect placed it inside her own personal inventory space. A notification flashed instantly, confirming that Rare had successfully become friends with Shigaru, proving the connection between subordinates and their master worked perfectly. Delighted by the discovery, Rare realized friend chat let her communicate across any distance, calling it perfect for discussing secret plans without anyone overhearing. Shigaru then asked a pointed question, wondering if such freedom with NPCs meant Rare could theoretically tame other players using the very same method. Excited by the possibility, Rare imagined absorbing every bit of experience earned by tamed players, envisioning endless streams of EXP flowing directly toward herself. Lost in a daydream of ruling like royalty, Rare pictured crowds bowing before her throne, though she quickly admitted she hadn't met any real players yet. Instead, she decided to focus on raising her 4 subordinates into powerful figures she jokingly called the 4 wise heavenly kings, using Shigaru's forces too. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Urfarin, a player named Wayne prepared nervously for the game's official launch, worried he might need a reliable companion. While wandering through town, Wayne suddenly noticed a familiar face and casually called out, curious what business might bring them together again. A gruff blacksmith bluntly asked Wayne if he was a safeholder, someone who used the Rare inventory function, noting how unusual it seemed for him to work alone. The blacksmith mentioned spotting another solo safeholder recently, leading Wayne to wonder whether more independent players existed within this particular region of the kingdom. The blacksmith warned that mercenary work grew far safer in groups, insisting 3 companions were always better than 2, while pretending not to pry right. On cue, the very beast-folk girl they had been discussing walked through the door, catching Wayne's immediate attention as she quietly closed it behind her. The girl, Carrie, asked the blacksmith to look after a summoned cat companion, politely thanking him before turning to leave the shop entirely. Watching her equipment closely, Wayne noted it looked exactly like typical starting gear, guessing she'd invested most of her earnings solely into her weapon. Approaching directly, Wayne asked if she was a player, and Carrie paused before Wayne introduced himself properly, admitting he was searching for a reliable partner too. Introducing herself as Rare instead, the girl left Wayne confused, since she looked exactly like Carrie, yet claimed a completely different player identity entirely. The official service launch begins as a large-scale celebration event is announced. While deep in the forest, Wayne and Carrie battle a massive ant. Carrie slashes the creature midair, while Wayne finishes it off with his flare arrow skill, both clearly pleased with their coordinated attack. Wayne apologizes to Carrie for dragging her along during his herb gathering, though she insists she genuinely doesn't mind accompanying him through the forest. Wayne explains he also needed supplies for the upcoming event, prompting Carrie to ask curiously what event exactly he could possibly be referring to. Wayne excitedly confirms she received the announcement about the big celebration for the official service launch, though Carrie seems to have completely forgotten it. He then asks Carrie directly if she would like to join the upcoming event together with him, catching her noticeably off guard by the question. Sulking slightly, Carrie admits she can't decide something so suddenly, telling Wayne it is difficult to give him an answer right away without thinking first. She promises to think it over, and Wayne agrees, hoping she will genuinely consider his offer as they continue walking deeper together through the woods. Elsewhere, an unseen figure notes with satisfaction that Carrie seems to be blending in remarkably well among the other players inside the game. Using her newly acquired summon vision and summon hearing skills, Carrie now shares her senses with her master, currently gathering information in a nearby town. Her master notes that other players apparently distinguish humans from NPCs based entirely on whether or not they are able to access inventory storage. The Vespoid Queen, Shigaru, questions whether Carrie using inventory openly might accidentally reveal that NPCs are also capable of accessing that same feature. Since players and NPCs look almost identical, the master reassures Shigaru it isn't a big deal, since there is barely any visible difference between them. The game prevents duplicate names, meaning players would only suspect Carrie is an NPC if she happened to share a name with someone else. Patrol squads report no issues though. The master worries that Carrie using another player's name, Rare, could raise suspicion, unless she goes public. Reflecting on her progress, she declares she has successfully taken control of this entire large forest over the course of just 1 week. She plans to use her ants to expand underground space, build a base of operations, and eliminate any obstacles like monsters and humans encountered. Thanks to the ants' hard work, she acquired numerous valuable skills, including summon vision and summon hearing, alongside a massive amount of experience points. Declaring nothing in this forest can stand against her now. She hesitates when Riley suddenly reports facing a hostile opponent, unsure what is happening. Shocked, she learns an army of skeletons appeared from nowhere, and Shigaru admits she received no warning reports, despite watching closely through her ants. Approaching the towering skeletons calmly, Rare walked forward while her subordinates whispered nervously, wondering if these enemies had truly appeared without warning. Rare instructed Riley to lead the ants forward as a stalling force, promising she would personally join the confrontation shortly after finishing preparations. Delighted by the sudden opportunity, Rare decided an army of skeletons would make a wonderful addition to her already growing collection of subordinates. Arriving at the battlefield, Rare apologized for making Riley wait, then announced she wanted to test a brand new skill against the undead. Rare activated Necromantic Barrier, and the skeletons around her rattled and trembled visibly, reacting strongly to whatever power the new skill exerted. Amazed by the result, Rare realized she could exert wide control, specifically over undead creatures, ordering the skeletons to line up before her. As explosions erupted across the battlefield, Rare noticed she had missed capturing one particular skeleton, who now stood apart from the rest. The remaining skeleton, revealed as an armored knight, rose furiously and roared, transforming into a horned demonic figure consumed by pure rage. The Horned King screamed that he would never forgive Rare, blaming her directly for whatever terrible fate had befallen him and his men. Confused by the accusation, Rare asked what he meant, and the enraged king vowed that everyone responsible would eventually pay for their actions. Rare admitted she genuinely had no idea what had happened to his king, though she acknowledged he clearly carried a serious grudge against her. The king charged forward regardless, ignoring her offer entirely, forcing Rare to sigh with mild exasperation at his continued aggressive, reckless behavior. Surrounded once again by countless ants, Rare reminded him firmly that she had already expressed genuine willingness to negotiate before resorting to violence. Rare pointed out that despite looking strong, he couldn't possibly defeat every single ant surrounding him, no matter how determined he seemed. She offered him 3 distinct options, the first being simple freedom to leave the forest and go wherever he personally wished. The second option let him join her household as a loyal follower, while a third promised assistance if he sought personal revenge. Smiling coldly, Rare added she could just as easily destroy him immediately, making clear refusal carried genuinely serious, unavoidable consequences for him. Pleased that he understood quickly, Rare watched as a system prompt appeared, asking whether she wanted to tame the named enemy, Deus of Resentment. With dawn approaching, Rare told everyone it was time to retreat, deciding they should return to base before sunlight illuminated the forest. Meanwhile, a separate system message confirmed that conditions for the large-scale event had finally been met, activating the AI in charge. An urgent system message floods the event server, warning that the transmission of program code for the newest large-scale event has completely failed, leaving nothing but errors behind. The transmission is officially aborted, and a stark warning spreads across the darkened screen, revealing that several event characters cannot be made available for the assignment. A few days later, on the actual day of the event, 2 of Rare's attendants search an empty hall, realizing their master already left without them. Rare's other subordinates discuss the sudden change of plans, reassuring themselves that Kenzaki-san and Yoroizuka-san are accompanying her. Though one still quietly worries about her safety, the organizers formally announce the first official large-scale event, revealing that this time it will take the form of a massive battle royale among players. Several unfamiliar players are introduced with serious expressions as organizers encourage everyone to fight their hardest, since the eventual winner will receive a wonderful prize. Inside the qualifying round for Block 16, chaos erupts as a heavily armored figure advances with unstoppable force, leaving nearby players stunned and scrambling backward. The armored figure walks calmly through the wrecked forest, stepping over broken trees and fallen swords, its metal armor clanging steadily with every measured step forward. One player grins fiercely after flinging an uprooted tree into a cluster of enemies, instantly eliminating them, while the armored figure remarks that he seems troublesome. Sword clashes ring out as the armored fighter deflects another blow, casually catches an incoming arrow, and leaves his stunned opponent wondering if he is toying with them. An explosive blast rocks the clearing, sending a combatant flying through shattered trees, while 2 players react in shock and shout that they must retreat immediately. The armored figure delivers another crushing blow, forcing a pained cry from the opponent, who realizes that fleeing is the only sensible choice once victory becomes impossible. The scene reveals Rare herself, smiling coldly as her subordinate declares that the battered opponents will now taste real power, announcing that her rampage has begun. Block 16 officially completes its qualifying round, and Rare Sama manages to qualify without suffering a single injury throughout the entire fight, brushing off her quick victory. All qualifying participants are instructed to wait patiently inside the spectator area, since the highly anticipated finals are scheduled to begin again shortly afterward. As Rare descends into the arena, the crowd erupts into nervous chatter, questioning how anyone managed to buy full-body armor within just 2 weeks. Realizing every spectator's eyes are now fixed directly on her, Rare quietly panics, admitting she only wanted to test Yoroizaka, San and Kun's abilities. Back at her base, DS questions why the princess still has leftover experience points, despite already strengthening every one of their party's current stats. Rare explains she is now experimenting with alchemy, attempting to determine whether she can successfully create a homunculus, one of the game's starting playable races. She reasons that since Suguru creates new subordinate NPCs using her haplodiploidy skill, there must likewise be a similar method available for her to create NPCs. Despite gathering nearly every skill available within the alchemy tree, Rare admits the homunculus recipe still hides its full list of required ingredients from her. Because of that setback, she changed her plans and decided to test a different recipe instead, one where she already clearly knows every required ingredient. Deus asks curiously what a knight's grudge actually is, while Rare suggests combining rusty armor and a sword salvaged from the graveyard where Deus was found. Rare then reveals that for the lump of metal ingredient, she plans to use one of the finest ores currently available inside their base. Through the activation of Magnum Opus, the alchemy process suddenly produces a towering armored knight, surrounded by several floating swords crackling with strange energy. Curious about its true nature, Rare wonders whether using Subordinate on it will teach her anything new, noting its appearance no longer resembles a simple weapon. She soon realizes the swords and armor are actually living creatures, successfully taming 5 living weapons alongside one impressively powerful living armor unit. Delighted by her new subordinates, Rare decides to name the armor Yoroizaka, San, while renaming the swords sequentially from Kenzaki Ichiro through Kenzaki Guro. As the finals are announced, participants are informed they will be teleported into the arena within 30 seconds, sparking nervous murmurs throughout the surrounding crowd. Among the gathered competitors, some express genuine excitement, eager to discover who among them will prove to be the toughest player in the tournament. Elsewhere, a story unfolds about a man who frequently fell ill throughout his childhood, remaining constantly under the attentive care of an AI nurse. Because of that experience, he grew deeply obsessed with nurses, always choosing to wear nurse outfits whenever the game allowed such customization options. In his honor afterward, people began calling him by a new nickname, as rumors spread that no one could ever stain his pristine nurse uniform. Nurse Yoichi surveys the grasslands ahead, using his eagle's eye skill to scan the terrain, noticing a distant lake beyond the forest line. He decides to hide within the forest for now, patiently waiting there for his next unsuspecting prey to wander into range. A masked assassin approaches, boasting that Yoichi noticed him purely because of his close proximity, confirming the wild rumors surrounding his archery skills. Yoichi calmly claims to be a devoted stoic archer, while the assassin sarcastically wonders if there might be some truth behind those exaggerated rumors. The assassin mocks his so-called stoic behavior, but Yoichi confidently insists that a mere scout like him cannot easily penetrate his defenses. Furious, the assassin screams that Yoichi's outfit is the exact opposite of stoic, right before their blades finally clash together violently. Both fighters exchange rapid slashing attacks across the open field, while Yoroizaka silently questions what exactly is wrong with these perverted opponents. Thanks to Yoroizaka, San sharing her enhanced vision, Rare admits she killed both strange men on impulse, since looking at them disturbed her deeply. Rare suddenly reacts to something unpleasant, insisting she needs to purge that disturbing memory from her mind immediately after witnessing it firsthand. An enormous explosion erupts across the battlefield, sending smoke and debris skyward, as the armored knight continues advancing steadily through the wreckage. Noticing several enemies hiding and shooting from within the surrounding woods, Rare decides chasing each one individually would be far too troublesome. She instead unleashes her devastating Hellflame skill, igniting the entire forest in a massive blaze meant to burn everything down at once. A group of players narrowly escapes the flames, realizing their armored opponent unexpectedly specializes in powerful magic rather than simple close combat. Struggling against his overwhelming strength, the remaining players agree they must work together immediately. Recognizing him as clearly the most dangerous opponent, a mage unleashes a powerful thunderbolt spell directly at him, hoping the lightning attack might finally succeed where earlier strategies had failed. Shocked that her magic proves completely ineffective, the group quickly changes tactics, deciding instead to charge forward together in a desperate assault. Their swords and axes clash uselessly against his armor, leaving them confused and desperate, questioning what could possibly explain his impossible durability. Before they can react further, he grabs 2 players by their heads, crushing forward with terrifying force as flames erupt around him. Watching the surviving fighters collapse one after another, a girl mutters that this situation is simply too crazy for anyone to comprehend fully. The finals officially conclude with Rare Sama declared the winner. Standing triumphantly among the wreckage, as the announcer congratulates her incredible, overwhelming victory. Rare remarks that she guesses she managed to defeat everyone participating in the tournament, seemingly unfazed by her overwhelming victory just moments earlier. Wayne sat frustrated after losing his qualifying round so easily, wondering out loud whether Rare had even bothered joining the tournament event at all that day, unable to contact Rare since he wasn't registered as her friend. Wayne watched in shock as the arena announced that the round's winner was somehow Rare Sama herself. Gilgamesh stared in disbelief, unable to understand how someone who struggled against a mere handful of ants could possibly claim victory over the entire tournament bracket. The staff announced a special exhibition match open to everyone, offering a rare prize to any player who managed to defeat Rare Sama under the previous Battle Royale rules. Crowds murmured with excitement over the promised rare item, while Gilgamesh wondered aloud what exactly was happening as challengers gathered inside the special forest field. Several players ran through the trees together, each admitting they were also targeting Rare, while one warrior grinned that his true target was someone else entirely. The group pressed deeper into the forest, agreeing they needed to stick together if they wanted any real chance at beating the mysterious final boss ahead. Chaos erupted as flying swords blocked approach routes, forcing archers and tanks to coordinate carefully, while facing what one player recognized instantly as a full raid battle. Fighters charged from every direction shouting Rare's name, desperate not to fall behind, only to freeze in shock when a black armored figure was declared the winner. Swords clanged uselessly against dark armor as fighters searched for any opening until sudden gurgling sounds signaled that another player had just been struck down. A massive surge of water crashed across the battlefield, knocking players aside and scattering the remaining warriors as they scrambled to keep their footing. Amid the flood, someone screamed Rare's name in panic, and Gilgamesh looked up with wide sweating eyes as the situation spiraled beyond anyone's expectations. The exhibition match ended with Rare Sama declared winner once again, as exhausted players muttered that the black armored fighter felt more like a staff, made raid boss. Gilgamesh approached another player, asking with unsettled eyes whether the mysterious winner had actually been Rare, still questioning if he had truly just died. The player admitted they only hunted together with Rare sometimes, prompting Gilgamesh to ask directly if they were friends who had spoken to the winner. Insisting Rare wasn't nearly that strong as far as he knew, Gilgamesh grew increasingly curious whether some hidden shortcut existed for gaining power so quickly. Gilgamesh extended a friend request toward a nearby player, asking to be added while requesting that they share anything they discovered about the situation. He revealed he had tried adding someone named Gilgamesh earlier, only for another player to claim the name first, forcing him to go by Gil instead. Reflecting quietly, the other player realized he would never have learned Gil's real name had he not added him as a friend that day. A few days later, the arena formally announced that the first event had ended, thanking every player who had taken part in the tournament. The princess approached the throne, remarking that many things seemed to have happened lately since Rare had been grinning so much recently, prompting a message from Boot Hour, Shoot Curse asking permission to use her hidden battle scenes in a promotional video. Carrie sat exhausted, breathing heavily, while another player noted she hadn't been in good shape lately, ever since she started meeting up regularly with someone named Wayne. Rare admitted that constantly attacking her own subordinate ants had clearly stressed Carrie out, explaining she only wanted to gather information by having Carrie pretend to be a weak player. Rare worried that if Carrie kept meeting Wayne, he might accidentally leak information he wasn't supposed to know, especially since he'd already started calling out her real name during the event. Deciding it was finally time to tell Wayne the truth, Rare apologized quietly to Carrie, explaining she would need one more meeting with him before saying goodbye. Deep in the forest, Wayne greeted Carrie warmly, saying it had been a while and that he'd been genuinely worried about her, though she claimed she'd simply been busy with real life, choosing a quiet clearing that seemed private enough for the conversation. Rare finally asked Wayne directly what exactly it was that he wanted to ask her. Wayne pointed out it had been 2 full weeks since they last hunted together, noting she seemed to have grown surprisingly comfortable walking through these particular woods. Confused by her unusually formal way of speaking, Wayne asked why she suddenly sounded so different, and she brushed it off by claiming she had simply been role-playing. Wayne studied her closely and asked if she was truly Rare, and she answered without hesitation that she was Rare, without any doubt whatsoever. Still uneasy, Wayne admitted he had a strange feeling that the person standing before him wasn't actually the same Rare he had come to know so well. Bluntly, Wayne asked if she wasn't Rare at all, while Carrie insisted the game verified brainwaves before login, making something so strange seem utterly impossible. Something about her formal speech struck Wayne as completely out of character, since the Rare he remembered had never once relied on such technical terms before. Realizing this was Carrie rather than herself, Rare admitted she had used a new possession skill called Summon Caster, mind to control Carrie's body directly. Their usual friend chat conversations came to Wayne's mind, and Rare confessed she had grown careless since her own body moved differently than Carrie's did. Never having exchanged friend cards with her, Wayne had no real way to confirm whether her true name was actually Rare in the first place. Suddenly certain, Wayne declared that the real Rare had been standing in front of him the entire time, leaving Carrie secretly thrilled at playing the cornered suspect. According to Wayne's theory, two players simply happened to share identical appearances, prompting Rare to calmly ask whether that idea truly matched what he believed. "Close enough," Rare replied, confirming one of them was the familiar Rare he had already met, while the other one standing here was her. Quiet satisfaction settled over Wayne as he murmured to himself that his suspicion about two identical players had finally been proven correct all along. A sly grin crossed Rare's face as she admitted tricking him by pretending to just confess, successfully convincing him two separate players looked alike. Provided Wayne never discovered that NPCs could secretly access inventory items and friend chat, her true appearance and identity would remain safely hidden from him. Demanding an explanation, Wayne asked why she had done any of this, though Rare merely shrugged and admitted she mostly just wanted to player kill. Memories surfaced of the closed beta, when she pretended to be a helpless NPC, luring foolish players close by claiming she desperately needed rescue. Horror crept across Wayne's face upon hearing her casually admit she had slashed lured players purely so she could finish them off later. Eventually she had to relocate between different towns, Rare explained, since repeating the same trick too often let other players catch on to her pattern. A sudden gasp escaped Wayne, as the horrifying realization hit him that he himself had once been among the very players she killed. Wild laughter spilled from Rare as she praised his growth as a player, while Wayne countered that his past foolishness now seemed genuinely hilarious. Furiously, Wayne demanded to know why she dragged Carrie into the scheme instead of luring him herself, given how identical they both looked. Luring people had never been her strength, Rare admitted, unlike Carrie, whose naturally pure and open personality made her perfect for the role. With a smirk, Rare asked whether Wayne had secretly been hopelessly attracted to Carrie, then revealed this forest served as her base for efficient player killing. Enraged, Wayne shouted that he refused to let her escape with such a plan, demanding to know if more killing was truly her intention. Casually raising a hand, Rare admitted that outcome was fine too, then teasingly asked whether he planned to summon his gang just to beat her senseless. Recognizing the blade instantly, Wayne gasped at the familiar sword she wielded, while Rare calmly announced that the time had finally come for them to part ways. Steel clashed violently as Wayne charged forward with everything he had, yet Rare merely smiled, promising she would be waiting for their next encounter eventually. Sparks scattered through the air as their blades collided in one final clash, leaving Wayne collapsed and gasping weakly as darkness closed around his vision. Slowly waking up on her throne, Rare noticed a message from management waiting for her, stretching lazily now that Wayne was finally out of the picture. Curious about the notification, Rare wondered aloud if this concerned the promotional video, smiling slyly as an amazing new idea suddenly began forming in her mind. An official commercial promised a realistic adventure across a magnificent continent, boasting reincarnation classes, intelligent NPCs, endless experience farming, and countless possibilities awaiting inside boot hour. Shoot curse. Wandering through the popular forest, players marveled at the powerful weapon they'd found, though one wondered aloud why the area seemed suspiciously overrun with nothing but ants. A skeletal creature suddenly rose from the ground, prompting an eager player to grab a nearby treasure chest and insist on testing his new equipment immediately. Chaos erupted as the skeleton lunged forward violently, forcing a player to dodge dangerously close, while another eagerly declared he wanted to test his freshly acquired weapon's sharpness. Fortuna fell instantly under the skeleton's brutal slash, leaving the remaining players surrounded and terrified as they realized they were now facing an unexpected boss monster. Startled by a passing owl, an old man screamed in fright, while Rare mused that hunting nothing but ants would eventually bore restless players rather quickly. Carrie questioned whether ordinary players could truly handle other monsters, noting that the ones they'd witnessed had been crushed within moments without any real struggle. Impressed by how effortlessly players kept wandering into the trap, another subordinate praised Rare's cleverness, though Rare insisted she hadn't lured every single one herself. One after another, curious players kept exploring her hidden base, the Great Lieb Forest, treating it eagerly like some newly discovered dungeon worth conquering. After parting ways with Wayne, Rare confirmed that her elaborate system had worked out flawlessly, exactly according to her carefully calculated original plan. She explained that spreading rumors about a hidden strengthening method connected perfectly with management's earlier request to use her official gameplay footage commercially, Online forums buzzed with speculation as Wayne spread word that mysterious black armor belonged to someone dangerously peeing players throughout the Great Libi Forest. Desperate to uncover any secret path toward greater strength, countless players flooded into the forest, while Wayne's public posts lent the rumors added credibility. Seeing opportunity in the chaos, Rare decided to transform the entire forest into a carefully disguised pseudo-dungeon, quietly formulating an ambitious new plan. Her strategy involved having engineer ants craft weapons from low-tier metals, scattering them throughout the forest so unsuspecting players would happily discover and claim them. Discussing the arrangement further, her subordinates confirmed no problems existed, since the game's harsh death penalty would naturally discourage players from pushing recklessly onward. Rare asked whether the current difficulty level could remain steady, and the towering ant creature calmly agreed to keep things exactly as requested. Delighted by the arrangement, Rare called it a perfect win-win situation, since players gained loot and experience while her subordinates grew stronger from every kill. Slurping her drink lazily, Rare wondered aloud whether she had accidentally transformed the entire game into some strange dungeon keeper simulation experience. Watching her experience points skyrocket thanks to the advertisement's popularity, Rare decided to keep following this unexpectedly profitable and increasingly bizarre new direction. Realizing she had essentially become this forest's final boss, Rare decided she needed at least one or two clever aces hidden up her sleeve. Recalling that Carrie once lived as a bandit, Rare wondered if a hidden knife might work perfectly, since ordinary players would never notice she carried one. According to the game's reincarnation system, certain conditions allowed characters to trigger events, changing their race entirely, sometimes requiring extra experience points as payment. Setting her sights on something specific, Rare corrected Jinka's guess about capturing vampires, insisting instead there existed another far more interesting path toward reincarnation. Legends surrounded the mythical Philosopher's Stone, alchemy's ultimate treasure rumored throughout history to grant immortality, and even transform ordinary lead into pure gold. Excitedly, Rare wondered whether obtaining such a stone could let her reincarnate into an entirely different race, unlike anything she currently possessed. Jinka pointed out that such legendary stones never actually existed in nature, prompting Rare to declare cheerfully that they should simply search for one anyway. Confident in her alchemy skill, Rare announced she believed she could create a Philosopher's Stone herself, surprising Jinka once the idea finally clicked. Determined to attempt her ambitious plan, Rare prepared to use the very same skill responsible for creating both Yoroizaka-san and Kenzaki-kun previously. While reviewing available alchemy recipes, Rare discovered an intriguing combination requiring a knight's grudge alongside a simple lump of metal as ingredients. Comparing known historical recipes for Philosopher's Stones, Rare noticed one unknown ingredient likely connected somehow to potassium carbonate found within her existing materials. Puzzled by unfamiliar chemistry terms like carbonate and potassium, Jinka and Marion listened as Rare explained the mystery ingredient unlocked only through direct contact. Having gathered every material available throughout the forest, Rare wondered whether ashes created from something special during the earlier fire might hold the answer. Waking suddenly, Rare greeted Jinka's regular report before agreeing to join them shortly. Curious about updates from her subordinates stationed elsewhere, using her summon caster skill to instantly travel toward wherever her subordinates waited. Rare arrived cheerfully greeting both Marion and Jinka warmly. Eastwolf Jinka welcomed her boss fondly after their long separation, while Marion expressed genuine gratitude that Rare had personally decided to visit. Diaz mentioned the reward earned from winning the recent tournament event, presenting a detailed map while asking the princess exactly where they currently stood. The map revealed their location within Tola Forest, situated directly north of their home base, the sprawling Great Libe Forest near Hyers. Rare explained she had sent Marion and Jinka scouting nearby regions, specifically hoping they might discover unfamiliar materials beyond what Great Libe Forest offered. Traveling together as an actual party through unexplored territory, Rare joked happily that this finally felt like she was truly playing a proper RPG. Diaz volunteered his squad to serve as vanguard, marching his undead forces forward while vowing never to let his princess face any accidental danger. Deep within the unexplored forest, Rare's group advances cautiously with Diaz leading the way as their vanguard through the shadowy trees and scattered undead remains. Diaz spots several enemies ahead and notes that judging by their armor, they might have once been comrades of his from an earlier undead conflict in this region. Rare theorizes that Suguru and Diaz were both once candidates chosen to become raid bosses for the Great Libe Forest, forced to fight one another before her arrival. Rare imagines that whoever won that brutal confrontation would have eventually ruled the entire forest, but instead both monsters became her subordinates through pure chance. She reasons that if this new forest is full of undead like Diaz, it likely means the undead faction ultimately triumphed over rivals during a similar power struggle here. Diaz asks whether Rare intends to subjugate the boss controlling this territory, and add it to her existing ranks alongside the weaker monsters she already commands. She confirms that defeating a boss normally destroys it into drops, but capturing it alive could grant her an entire undead army for her dungeon. Confident in her plan, Rare extends her hand toward Diaz and declares that she wants him to present that undead army directly to her as tribute. Diaz kneels respectfully and agrees without hesitation, reaching out his skeletal hand as Rare steps forward to seal their arrangement with a simple gesture. The bargain is confirmed through a handshake, and soon afterward, Rare's growing party continues marching deeper into the eerie forest toward their next encounter, traveling alongside her wolf companion, Carrie, and the newly acquired undead ranks. Rare admits quietly to herself that she has been feeling utterly bored lately. She reflects that Suguru manages the dungeon efficiently on his own, while Carrie and Diaz handle monster battles competently, leaving little for her to actually do. Rare acknowledges she does not particularly miss any specific activity, yet she feels she has grown steadily less active over the past several uneventful days. As dawn approaches and sunlight begins piercing through the treetops, Diaz worries about how far this seemingly endless forest actually stretches around them. Suddenly the forest erupts into chaos, as Carrie shouts a warning, alerting Rare that something dangerous is closing in rapidly, from an unexpected direction. A massive tree suddenly cracks and shifts unnaturally, revealing itself as a disguised monster that had remained completely still during their earlier passage through the area. Carrie realizes with alarm that nearly every tree surrounding them has secretly been alive the entire time, transforming the peaceful forest into a battlefield. Diaz reports that he has not encountered any undead since earlier, confirming that almost all threats around them now come from these living tree monsters instead. Watching countless trees attack simultaneously, Rare wonders if this unusual forest simply shifts between active trees during daylight and active undead throughout the night. Confused about the endless waves, Rare recalls that NPCs normally stay defeated permanently, yet these tree monsters keep reappearing, without any sign of stopping. Diaz explains that ordinary NPCs can only respawn after a full hour passes, provided their original master remains alive somewhere within the forest. Carrie suggests testing whether these respawning trees could actually be bound to some hidden master, similar to how the ants were previously subordinated. Rare successfully tames a camphor treant, using her subordinate skill, confirming that these mysterious trees indeed belong to an entirely different classification of monster. Shugaru examines the treant's unique traits, including overgrowth, root division, tree swarm, and photosynthesis, realizing these abilities explain their unnaturally rapid growth cycle. Rare notes that since this treant apparently lacks a master to respawn from, countless more of its kind must be scattered throughout the forest. Rare decides to tame every treant present and later determine whether they could take root successfully within her own Great Lieb forest. After the tiring extermination is finally finished, DAES reports discovering another location nearby where undead activity has grown noticeably stronger than before. With the sun setting quickly, Rare insists on wrapping up their business here promptly before DS leads the group toward this newly discovered site. Arriving at a massive tree stump, Rare notices an unfamiliar armored figure and asks DS directly whether he recognizes this particular undead knight. DS admits his appearance has changed considerably, but he suspects there is a high possibility that this stranger was once his former comrade in arms. DS instructs the group to let him handle the mysterious knight personally, while ordering Shugaru to manage the surrounding skeletons approaching from every direction. Observing the enemy's aura and stance carefully, Diaz concludes this rival knight holds a distinctly higher rank than himself within the undead hierarchy. The unnamed knight appears to weave a debuffing aura around the battlefield, before clashing swords directly against Diaz beneath the pale crescent moonlight. Their blades collide repeatedly in a fierce exchange, each powerful strike ringing loudly as both undead warriors test one another's raw combat strength. Rare watches closely from a distance, suspecting immediately that this formidable opponent must indeed be the true undead boss ruling over this territory. She unleashes her flare arrow spell toward the mysterious knight, testing his defenses before escalating further, with a devastating thunderbolt strike moments later. The knight endures both magical assaults admirably, though visibly weakened, before ultimately dropping to his knees in exhausted defeat before Rare's overwhelming combined power. Standing triumphant above him, Rare demands firmly that the defeated knight finally accept her authority and submit to becoming her loyal subordinate. The system confirms she has successfully tamed the Terror Knight, named Sieg, though Diaz greets him warmly, noting it has truly been a long time. Diaz asks whether Sieg was once one of his former colleagues, and Rare quickly arranges a friend card exchange so all three can properly communicate. Introducing himself formally, Sig claims the title of captain over the Third Order, though Diaz quietly corrects him, noting he was only his junior back then. 6 Knight Orders once existed in their former kingdom, with the 3rd through 6th serving as purely military forces beneath Sir Diaz's elite First Order Royal Guards. Curiosity getting the better of her, Rare asks which of the 6 human kingdoms Sieg originally belonged to, since Diaz never once mentioned this detail. Confusion crosses Sieg's skull as he insists only one unified country ever existed on this continent, a memory Diaz confirms matches his own. Nothing about this history appears anywhere on the official game site, leaving Rare to wonder whether a forgotten unified nation once truly existed here. How strangely detailed this environment feels, she thinks, suspecting the continent conceals an unrevealed past hidden beneath what seemed like a simple world simulator. Memories surface for Sieg as he recalls joining an expedition into the Great Lieb Forest alongside his king, a journey that ultimately became their grave. Powerful officials, it turns out, established the current 6 kingdoms directly atop the ruins left behind after that unified kingdom's fall. Fury builds visibly in Diaz as he spits that those officials had the audacity to steal not merely their king but the entire continent. Those rats, he growls, condemning the men who carved the continent into 6 territories purely to satisfy their own selfish ambitions. Uncertainty colors Sieg's response when he admits he isn't sure his resentment matches Diaz's own, though guilt over his fallen men still lingers. Turning to face him directly, Rare asks whether Sieg also harbors resentment toward the 6 kingdoms currently ruling over their once unified homeland. Without hesitation, Sieg vows that if destroying those 6 kingdoms is the only path toward settling these feelings, his sword belongs to Rare now. Quests generated by AI were meant to drive this game's core design, yet countless players chase entirely different goals like raiding or speedrunning instead. Fairness feels distant to Rare as she admits wanting her own purpose, frustrated that everyone else seemed to have found meaning except her. A goal has finally arrived, and standing before her subordinates, Rare declares boldly that their new mission is destroying all 6 human kingdoms. Expansion, she reasons, worked perfectly across monster territory before, so applying that same pressure should gradually cause these fragile kingdoms to crumble too. Behind her, murmurs spread among the subordinates, who agree that Rare seems destined to rule as sovereign over this dawning new age of monsters. Given that Sieg's subordinates already placed the undead firmly under her banner, attention naturally shifts toward bringing the scattered treants under control next. Countless treants roam nearby, Diaz warns, nearly impossible to distinguish from one another, meaning subjugating them all could demand considerable patience and time. Standing before the towering ancient tree, Rare's eyes widen with sudden interest as she wonders aloud whether this could be something far from ordinary. After deciding to destroy the 6 kingdoms, Rare stood before an enormous ancient tree while her subordinates watched, and she declared that her first action would soon prove itself special. The moment she unleashed charm, strange golden particles rustled through the bark, and Rare noted aloud that she could definitely feel some kind of resistance pushing back against her power. Grinning widely, Rare activated control next, confidently confirming to herself that the towering tree in front of her was indeed a treant hiding in plain sight. She then cast Subordinate on the bending giant, asking whether it truly was an elder camphor treant, while eagerly preparing to check its detailed hidden status information. A notification suddenly appeared, announcing that her new follower had fulfilled a condition for reincarnation, requiring 5,000 experience points, leaving Rare stunned mid-inspection of its skills. Rare shook with visible disbelief, shouting that this ordinary treant could somehow reincarnate before she herself ever had, questioning how such reincarnation could possibly happen first. Muttering that affording it wasn't impossible, she wondered about taking a loan, while her subordinates gasped that 5,000 experience points was an outrageously expensive demand. Torn between hesitation and fear of losing the opportunity, Rare argued with herself over the harsh cost, until the elf girl beside her asked if something was wrong. Frustrated, Rare finally gave in, shouting for the reincarnation to proceed and demanding her points be taken immediately, muttering that only someone like her could afford this madness. Light exploded from the ancient tree, as cracks spread violently across its bark, and Rare realized aloud exactly why the reincarnation had cost so many experience points. The tree's new form was revealed as a world tree, and another notification appeared, offering Rare herself the chance to reincarnate into a high elf for 200 experience. Startled again, Rare demanded to know who was reincarnating this time, only to realize with surprise that the notification was actually referring to herself as an elf. Reflecting on her journey, Rare admitted she had originally set out searching for materials to craft an item, allowing reincarnation without needing rare valuable resources at all. Comparing the cost to the World Tree's outrageous price, Rare decided 200 experience points was nothing, declaring she couldn't possibly pass up this rare chance now. As light enveloped her, Rare apologized to her worried companions, calmly explaining that she had reincarnated successfully into a high elf without any lasting complications. Her subordinate noted that her face remained unchanged, though her hair and ears had grown noticeably longer, adding that she now appeared far more radiant than before. Rare admitted she sensed everyone's gaze shifting toward her, and her subordinates agreed cheerfully, sparkling as they explained her new racial trait boosted NPC favorability enormously. Deciding their business was finished, Rare announced it was time to return to the Great Libby Forest, having accomplished her original goal of reincarnating successfully at last. Lone Skeleton Knight mentioned that Deus could answer questions about reincarnation's timing, while another offered to leave managing the forest to the newly formed World Tree. Reminiscing together, two skeletal knights laughed about old memories, admitting they never expected to serve once again under the watchful care of Sir Deus. Standing beneath the World Tree, Rare asked politely if she could receive one of its branches. Admitting the request might seem strange to make, she paused awkwardly afterward, realizing that although she'd only asked for a single branch, the tree's reaction had left her uncertain. Inside the mansion, a massive dead branch now stood as tall as any street tree, with Rare noting they could finally attempt to craft various new items. Remy arrived cheerfully, apologizing for the wait, while Rare privately reflected that she had trained Remy extensively in numerous production-related skills over recent months. Remy had begun producing various items for the group, eventually managing their growing dungeon assembly line, while also gathering information as a merchant in town. Examining a flask of ashes, Rare theorized that the missing ingredient for a philosopher's stone was potassium carbonate, essentially ashes taken from the World Tree itself. When the recipe finally unlocked, listing sulfur, iron strong acid, and a monster heart, Rare realized ordinary ashes wouldn't work since only saturated ones counted. Deciding better ingredients might yield stronger results, Rare tried again, only to notice the material's name had changed, hinting the World Tree offered rarer variants. A radiant philosopher's stone finally formed, though its description remained frustratingly vague, simply stating it would raise the user's rank by exactly 2 levels. Wanting to test its effects properly, Rare asked Remy to check whether the philosopher's stone could be reliably mass-produced under different crafting conditions. Deus volunteered immediately, explaining that undead never naturally grow stronger with age, so testing this stone could greatly improve their entire group's combat capabilities. Rare instructed Deus to hold the stone carefully, confirming he would be the very first among them to test its mysterious reincarnation effects. A notification appeared, offering reincarnation into a Death Knight, or spending 100 experience points instead to become something greater, called a Death Lord. Deus reincarnated successfully into a fearsome Death Lord, feeling immensely stronger than before. While Rare confirmed the experiment had clearly succeeded beyond her expectations, Remy thanked Rare afterward, reporting she had finished analyzing the synthesis process and confirming stones could indeed be mass-produced under identical conditions. Curious about further possibilities, Rare activated another stone herself, only to discover its true classification was actually a rarer greater philosopher's stone. A flood of new notifications appeared, listing possible reincarnations into Dark Elf, Living Spirit, Demonic Spirit, Spirit Lord, or even Demon Lord. Rare realized what she'd created wasn't an ordinary philosopher's stone at all, but this rarer, more powerful, greater philosopher's stone instead. She understood Spirit Lord and Living Spirit represented evolutions beyond High Elf, though the experience cost nearly matched what the World Tree once required. A special condition unlocked reincarnation into Dark Elf, while Rare noted becoming Demon Lord demanded the exact same enormous number of experience points. Standing confidently in the mansion, Rare declared it was finally time to choose between reincarnating as either Spirit Lord or Demon Lord. She reasoned that any character ruling monsters should naturally become Demon Lord, admitting the special condition attached genuinely piqued her curiosity and interest. Without hesitation, Rare confirmed her decision, and brilliant light immediately surrounded her as the reincarnation into Demon Lord officially began its transformation process. Energy surged violently through the mansion as her subordinates shielded their eyes, watching Rare's body dissolve into radiant light during the sudden reincarnation. Her new form emerged bearing curved horns, feathered white wings, and an entirely different aura, radiating power far beyond her previous elven appearance. Her status screen revealed the Demon Lord race, granted horns, wings, and demonic eyes, each trait boosting resistance and unlocking entirely new supernatural abilities. Siege observed that her ears had shortened noticeably while shiny new horns emerged, and Rare asked nervously whether her transformation had finally ended. Diaz added that pure white wings now grew from her back above the waist, giving her an unexpectedly divine and majestic overall appearance. Rare noted with relief that none of her previous racial traits had disappeared, meaning she'd simply gained numerous new abilities on top of the old ones. Worried about her flashy new look, Rare decided she needed to lay low for a while and carefully hide her recent reincarnation from others. Meanwhile, a message rippled across the world, informing every player and NPC with a certain skill that a demon lord had been born. Startled by the sudden announcement, Rare questioned what had just happened, while distant figures inside a grand cathedral reacted with equal shock and alarm. Church leaders rose in alarm after receiving an oracle, declaring with dread that a dangerous new enemy of humanity had just been born. Inside the Royal Palace of Hires, Prime Minister Douglas O'Connell read the urgent report with disbelief, demanding to know exactly where the new calamity had appeared. Advisors traced the disturbance to the eastern part of the kingdom, near the town of Erfarin, deep within the Great Libi forest, where the trees shook violently. Within that forest, a girl with long pale hair and small horns stood amid the wreckage, said to have been born there, according to a divine message. Back in the capital, ministers panicked at the thought that 6 known calamities had somehow become 7, watching smoke and rubble spread across the ruined streets. As terrified citizens ran through the crumbling town, a towering winged figure rose above the destruction, radiating an aura that marked her as the 7th calamity. The 6 existing calamities appeared in turn: the Golden Dragon, the Ancient Vampire Lord, the Archangel, the Archdemon, the Insect King, and the Lord of Merman. Officials admitted there were no reports yet on the new calamity's damage, while others wondered whether it rivaled the destruction caused by the angels of the Sky Castle. Summono suggested the calamity had only just been born and might not yet be able to use its full power, offering the council a small measure of hope. One minister noted that no calamity had ever been defeated before, yet none had ever been challenged immediately after its birth, leaving open the faint possibility of victory. Douglas ordered an extermination force assembled immediately, reasoning that if the calamity had just been born, it might still be weak enough to defeat like a child. Gripping his fist tightly, Douglas declared this moment a crisis for all of humanity, insisting they take every possible measure while a chance still remained. Meanwhile, inside the throne room, the new demon lord sneezed gently, and her subordinates fussed over her, wondering aloud if someone was already talking about their master. Amused by the idea, she compared herself to a crawfish and a spider labeled as invasive species, questioning what being called a special being of calamity truly meant. She decided to let the matter rest for now, admitting there was still much she wanted to learn about being a demon lord in this world. Elsewhere, a random player discovered that becoming a demon lord was possible, growing anxious that revealing such a secret could cause a commotion among everyone. Standing before her group of subordinates, cat-eared warriors, an armored skeleton, and a dragon, she declared her need to build an army worthy of opposing the human kingdoms. Shalkened a status screen and offered to reincarnate her subordinates into stronger forms, while also hoping to learn new skills and check her abilities as demon lord. Shot noticed a volcano marked on the map and wondered how much there was to explore, while one of her subordinates agreed that the area looked interesting too. As the group prepared for whatever lay ahead, a new message reached every player announcing the second large-scale event, unveiling fresh chaos across the world they called home. Rare received an official message announcing the second large-scale event, gathering her subordinates around the throne to explain what this new development would involve. She explained that a massive invasion from monster territory into human lands was about to happen, spreading turbulence and unrest throughout the entire continent. The event was officially called the Large-Scale Offensive and Defensive Battle, during which nearby towns and villages would be assaulted, while monster territories flooded the continent with undead. Players would choose to side with either the monsters or humanity, needing to successfully invade or defend their chosen side throughout the 10 in-game days. Special rules applied during the event, granting 10% bonus experience and preventing XP loss upon death, though stats would drop 5% for an hour. Rare admitted that siding with humans was far too late for her, prompting one of her subordinates to ask which side she truly intended to support. While her subordinates prepared to discuss invasion strategy, Rare received a direct message from the administration, curious about what the admins could possibly want from her. The message revealed that her current domain included the Great Libe Forest and the Toll Forest, where the world tree she managed had been raised. Confused why the admins needed such specific detail about her domain, Rare confirmed that the Toll Forest was indeed under her management through the world tree. The message continued, explaining that the monsters originally meant to invade from those regions had already become Rare's own subordinates through her earlier actions. Realizing the implication, Rare panicked as she understood the event monsters were now under her personal command, meaning the planned invasion could no longer proceed. She wondered aloud whether this message was secretly a complaint, since simply enjoying herself had unintentionally disrupted the entire administration team's carefully organized plans. The administration then requested her cooperation, asking her instead to attack the Kingdom of Hires herself, leaving Rare completely stunned by the unexpected proposal. They clarified that declining meant she would not participate, and towns near her territory would be announced as safe, while cooperation promised special rewards. Curious about the invading monsters, Rare learned undead were spread across the continent, and the administration considered replacing missing NPC bosses with her as a raid boss. Her subordinates realized the event monsters were actually Dias and Sieg, wondering if those two had been specifically prepared and trained ahead of time for this event. Rare considered simply staying neutral and observing from the sidelines, until she remembered that during the first event, sudden plan changes had already caught everyone off guard. She realized that announcing safety around the Great Libi Forest would essentially tell players there was something worth investigating hidden within her own territory. Reflecting quietly, Rare decided that since her actions had disrupted the administration's original plans, she should willingly cooperate and help resolve the situation herself. Turning to her subordinates, Rare declared they would join the invasion after all, reasoning that other players deserved the same chance to enjoy the game fully. Rare declared that if some cities got destroyed during her participation, it would simply be an unavoidable side effect, since she intended to win using her full power. Shigarku thanked her for approving the plan, while another subordinate admitted not fully understanding the strategy but felt glad their boss seemed to be enjoying herself. Rare gathered her subordinates to discuss attacking a city, wondering aloud whether they would need to deal with knights and soldiers defending the settlement. Wone's skeletal subordinate explained that border towns likely lacked many knights, since only a small number of soldiers had pledged allegiance to any local lord. He continued, noting that a frontier lord could only sustain so many knights, since receiving that pledge of allegiance placed a heavy burden on the lord. Rare recalled reading in the admin Q&A that becoming a knight required subordinating oneself to a noble or a specific NPC within an order of knights. Her subordinate pointed out that unlike ordinary enemies, these knights respawned after dying, since being subordinated classified them permanently as retainers under their lord's protection. Rare wondered whether leaving the lord alive would let them repeatedly hunt the respawning knights for experience, as long as the lord himself stayed alive. Surprised by the idea, she realized conquering a city like Urfarin might be far easier than expected, since their combined army could overwhelm it within an hour. She called for a map, ready to plan the invasion carefully, even though the administration had originally planned for the event to last 10 full days. Rare insisted she wanted to hold nothing back, explaining that even as a solo player, she still wanted everyone watching to recognize the results of her efforts. Reviewing the map, she noted Urfarin and the town of Lords near the Tola Forest as targets, while her undead and insect subordinates marched forward on event day. Vast rows of skeleton soldiers and giant ants advanced across the battlefield, halting only when their commanders called for the march to stop and regroup. One subordinate promised to forward everyone's excitement through friend chat to those unable to join, believing the boss's bold idea would lift everyone's spirits. Standing together beneath the night sky, the monster army prepared to march with pride, vowing to ravage humanity and prove their combined strength beyond doubt. Wolves, cat-eared warriors, and armored knights advanced together across the frozen field, forming an imposing procession behind Rare, as their leader guided the invasion forward. Addressing her followers, Rare declared that the time to finally face humanity had arrived, acknowledging the hardship they had endured together up until this very moment. She explained how she carefully judged each enemy's strength, ensuring only those capable of fighting back were killed once they had gathered enough experience. One subordinate remarked that the psychological strain of making such calculated decisions repeatedly must have weighed heavily on her. Despite her calm and confident exterior, Rare declared that from this day forward, they would step onto the main stage together, ready to reveal their strength to the entire world. Standing before the Kingdom of Hires, Rare declared that they would start with this country, announcing their intent to strike Urfarin, a town bordering the forest. She commanded her subordinates to kill without hesitation, urging them to burn, melt, pierce, or destroy anyone who dared cross their path during the assault. Rare instructed her army to prove through overwhelming power that she stood as the supreme ruler of the entire continent, while skeletons and insects prepared to march. The sound of weapons and armor clanged loudly as her diverse forces, wolves, skeletons, insects, and knights, assembled together beneath the heavy falling rain. Feeling genuine excitement building inside her, Rare smiled fiercely before giving the final order for her assembled army to finally move out toward battle. Meanwhile, inside Urfarin, The town buzzed with unusual activity as townsfolk chattered nervously about the sudden influx of mercenaries gathering there recently. A young woman mentioned that despite the distance to the Great Libi forest, rumors spread that an entire army of monsters was preparing to attack. Startled by the news, another patron questioned whether it was true, noting that mercenaries had already been gathering steadily near the town gate. Two mercenaries admitted they had nowhere else to go, having been disowned by their families, while worrying their favorite tavern might be destroyed if attacked. Walking together, one remarked that NPCs couldn't receive system messages, so their carefree attitude toward the coming danger wasn't really their fault at all. Excited about the event's experience bonus, the two mercenaries agreed a battle against monsters sounded thrilling, eager to gain as much experience as possible. Suddenly someone shouted a warning from above, announcing that the invaders had finally arrived, causing the ground itself to tremble with heavy stomping footsteps. Panicked townspeople screamed about an approaching army of monsters, questioning whether the invaders were undead as announced, only to realize giant ants approached instead. A massive swarm of ants charged across the field toward the town, while Rare and her cloaked subordinates watched silently as the march finally began. Massive swarms of monstrous ants surge across the plains under Rare's command, marching endlessly toward a defenseless city, while chaos begins spreading through the terrified populace nearby. The endless tide of ants advances relentlessly toward the city walls, forcing two frightened guards atop the ramparts to question why such an unprecedented monster attack has begun. The guards grow increasingly desperate, wondering aloud whether their forces can possibly hold back an army so massive, sensing that this looming disaster feels far worse than expected. Adventurers realize the invading monsters are ants from the Great Forest rather than the undead they anticipated, while officials blame newcomers for angering the forest's guardian creatures. Confused adventurers question why these ants behave so differently, until their captain firmly declares they cannot ignore local monsters, ordering everyone to stop joking and prepare immediately. A colossal shockwave rips through the city's outer tower, sending debris scattering as a monstrous armored figure descends violently, unleashing repeated explosive strikes against the fortified structure. Floating high above the destruction, the armored figure carrying Rare comments casually on the fight's difficulty, recalling how thoroughly they warned that local monsters could not be dismissed. Rare reflects that although she orchestrated this invasion, blaming the players feels ironic, since she herself started as a player, silently noting that players truly are troublesome. Carrie reports directly to Rare, suggesting they simply flatten the city instantly with powerful spells, though Rare confidently states she alone could already end the battle immediately. Rare explains she prefers conquering properly like a true demon lord, choosing instead to rely on her subordinates' combined strength rather than finishing everything through her own power. Inside, the Great Libi Forest's temporary command chamber, subordinates report that enemy forces are preparing for a siege while the city gates are being sealed shut. As panicked defenders scramble to close the heavy gates completely, Rare's forces calmly discuss destroying them afterward to shatter enemy morale before pressing their advantage further. Grinning fiercely, Rare commands her armored subordinate to open fire, unleashing devastating firepower toward the city's defenses, without hesitation as the assault escalates dramatically. A tremendous explosion tears through the fortified wall, sending massive chunks of stone and debris flying violently across the battlefield in a thunderous, overwhelming display of destruction. Stunned defenders watch helplessly as the crumbling wall gives way entirely, disbelief spreading among them, while monstrous ant subordinates surge forward through the widening breach. Chaos erupts as the ants break fully into the city, overwhelming panicked civilians and soldiers alike, while a wolf-eared warrior fights desperately to hold the line. Determined fighters insist they hold the advantage in narrow corridors, comparing the chaotic urban battle to their previous encounters within the Great Forest's dangerous dungeon depths. Flames erupt violently as fire, spitting ants scorch everything nearby, horrified soldiers screaming in agony while realizing they have never faced monsters wielding such devastating firepower before. Rare calmly explains that her specialized artillery, sniper, aerial, and assault units were never deployed before, since the Great Forest dungeon restricted their previous usage entirely. Rare invites her subordinates to enjoy the spectacle from the finest seats available, urging them to continue slaughtering enemies as they steadily seize control of the city's outskirts. An armored knight finally arrives amid rubble alongside his allies, prompting Rare to note that these knights had sworn subordination to the local lord defending the city. Rare's Vespoid soldiers on observation duty grow restless from boredom, prompting her subordinate Suguru to ask how they should properly deal with the arriving knight forces. Rare agrees the idea sounds good, deciding it is finally time to give her bored soldiers something meaningful to accomplish, leaving the specific details entirely to Suguru's discretion. Overwhelmed players find themselves completely cornered by countless ants, realizing hopelessly that their forces are far too outnumbered to possibly win this desperate confrontation. A commander mocks his mercenaries for losing to mere ants until a subordinate warns something dangerous is approaching from above, just as the ants retreat suddenly. Furious that nobody warned him about flying threats, the commander watches in shock as swarms of armed Vespoid bees descend rapidly, revealing enemies beyond simple ants. Vespoid soldiers snatch startled defenders from rooftops, carrying them helplessly through the air while panicked victims struggle and scream, demanding answers about what is happening to them. Despite desperate pleas to stop, the Vespoid releases its captive from tremendous height, sending the screaming knight crashing violently downward toward the unforgiving city rooftops below. Surveying the destruction below, Rare's subordinate confirms none of the fallen knight's bodies vanished, meaning they were all genuine NPCs rather than instantly respawning players. A system message appears explaining that only players receive respawn prompts after death, while NPCs lack this ability since they cannot receive such notifications entirely. Rare explains that NPCs bound through her subordinate skill respawn automatically after 1 hour, though she admits farming them yields disappointingly little experience for the effort. Discussing whether to establish a new base within the conquered town, Rare instead decides simply finding and eliminating the Lord's Master would resolve things faster. Rare orders everything razed completely to the ground, reasoning this particular location sits too close to the forest and offers no meaningful strategic value. Satisfied with Shigaru handling the remaining cleanup, Rare shifts her attention elsewhere, announcing she'll check on the distant settlement of Lords. Next, using her summon vision skill, Rare peers through the eyes of her owl subordinate, Aminas, wondering how the treants she left in charge are managing things. Flying over the kingdom of Hires toward Lords, the view reveals the settlement's terrible battered condition, leaving observers genuinely stunned by the extensive surrounding devastation. The owl humbly expresses incredible honor at receiving praise from someone as divine as the demon lord herself, admiring the strangely beautiful transformed forest below. The owl notes they've now witnessed the full effect of Rare's remarkable skill firsthand, referring reverently to what she calls simply the Great Blessing. This Great Blessing skill abnormally accelerates growth speed for all plant-based life within its range by 5,000 times, creating the towering world tree. Loud cracking sounds echo through the forest as branches snap violently, prompting a stunned onlooker to suggest they've surely continued this destructive process long enough already. With her MP nearly depleted, the treant announces she must cease her overwhelming growth ability now, letting silence settle heavily across the newly transformed forest landscape. The owl subordinates glance around the eerily still town, questioning whether everyone inside got completely wiped out, before Rare decides simply to let the forest consume it. Rare's owl mentions their next destination will likely resemble a peaceful picnic trip toward La Colline, prompting curiosity about what plans she has hereafter. Rare reveals she has been searching for a fresh location to build a new dungeon, noting La Colline serves as a major trade hub, according to available maps. Studying the map further, Rare decides that since the current event remains ongoing, she should aim for whichever location offers the greatest possible impact as her base. Raising her hands dramatically, Rare declares she will reduce the magnificent capital entirely to ruins, transforming its remains into a permanent nest for the undead. While Rare's group continues attacking distant towns, the story shifts toward the kingdom of Hire's royal capital, revealing another perspective inside its towering royal castle. Wayne finds himself standing among knights inside the palace, questioning silently how he ended up here after originally joining Erfaren's defense forces at the second event's start. Wayne and his allies charge confidently against approaching ants, shouting encouragement, until overwhelming numbers crash through their formation, ultimately killing him despite the fierce resistance shown. After dying, Wayne wakes unexpectedly in a completely different town, having sworn moments earlier that he would successfully defend Erfaren no matter what happened. The same devastating pattern repeated itself across the next town and another one afterward, each location quickly falling helplessly before the relentless monster attacks. Eventually, these repeated defeats and transfers led Wayne all the way to the royal capital itself, standing uncertainly before its massive fortified towers and walls. Reflecting honestly on his situation, Wayne admits he always knew he wasn't particularly strong, ultimately just an average player among countless other adventurers in this world. Wayne wonders how someone like him, far from being a top player, somehow managed to gain entry inside the heavily guarded royal castle grounds. Wayne explains he simply visited the mercenary guild, seeking information and a meal, but opening his item box to pay instantly dragged him into this restricted area. Brought before the throne as a so-called safeholder, Wayne kneels, while the imposing prime minister introduces himself confidently as Douglas O'Connell of the Kingdom of Hires. Douglas welcomes Wayne warmly, acknowledging he is likely confused about why he has been specifically summoned here, and Wayne nervously introduces himself before listening further. Before addressing the main topic directly, Douglas insists on first explaining the kingdom's current dire situation regarding widespread monster attacks happening across the entire realm. Wayne questions whether the NPCs truly understand the severity of what is happening, since players merely perceive these dangerous attacks as nothing more than a scripted event. Wayne expresses shock upon learning the first incident actually began 10 days ago, despite believing the official event itself only started just yesterday. Douglas reveals the Holy Church's patriarch received a divine oracle announcing that a dangerous new enemy of humanity had recently been born somewhere within their world. These special monsters, known as calamities, each possess power capable of destroying entire continents, and the oracle confirmed a seventh one had emerged. Wayne quickly deduces this calamity must represent the event's true final boss, correctly connecting it as the actual reason behind the widespread monster invasion. Douglas explains they urgently need Wayne to gather as many allies as possible to help fight the approaching calamity threatening the royal capital directly. Startled by the sudden revelation, Wayne demands proof, questioning how the calamity could already be heading toward the capital so unexpectedly soon after emerging. Douglas points toward the Great Libi forest on the map, explaining reports confirm the entire region has already been completely overrun by monstrous ant creatures. Douglas explains that Urfarin, quickly annihilated yesterday by an ant attack, sits directly between their current position and the monster-infested Great Libi forest itself. Wayne confirms he personally witnessed the ant attack in Urfarin, having actually been present within the town himself when the devastating assault occurred there. The map reveals widespread destruction across multiple towns, with skeletons destroying some settlements while plant-type monsters completely swallowed lords whole on that very day. Douglas reveals giant wasps carrying ants were responsible for these attacks, adding that today La Colline, their kingdom's vital transportation hub, suffered a similar devastating assault. Wayne suddenly realizes wasps also appeared, specifically within Urfarin, prompting Douglas to confirm his suspicions with visible dread as the pattern grows increasingly clear. Connecting Urfarin, La Colline, and the Great Libi forest itself, Douglas concludes the ants and wasps are likely direct subordinates serving the mysterious calamity's will. Carefully marking each destroyed town on his detailed map, Douglas begins tracing a pattern, murmuring that connecting these locations together might reveal something significant. The marked path reveals the monsters are heading straight west, moving directly toward one clear destination that lies waiting at the very center, the royal capital. Wayne panics, insisting he cannot possibly fight something so powerful when he already struggled against the weaker monsters, questioning why a final boss would appear this deep inland. Studying the map further, Wayne notes La Colline actually appears quite far from the royal capital, despite having been attacked only earlier that very day. Douglas clarifies the journey actually takes 8 days on foot, or 2 days by horse, leaving Wayne stunned that such alarming news traveled so remarkably fast. Douglas reveals that 9 days ago, he dispatched an extermination force from the capital to slay the calamity, including a knight serving as his personal retainer. That very night, having just resurrected within the royal capital, frantically reports that the entire extermination force was completely wiped out in La Colline moments earlier. Wayne realizes with horror that the knight's last sleeping location before departing 9 days ago must have been inside the capital, explaining their sudden resurrection there. Douglas confirms Wayne's guess correctly, revealing his knights received powerful potions preventing sleep entirely, allowing them to march relentlessly for days without ever resting once. Wayne calculates that dying and instantly respawning proves faster and more reliable than traveling physically, letting NPCs share urgent information across vast distances within mere hours. Douglas explains his knights swore complete loyalty toward defending this land, insisting nobles like himself must protect the kingdom regardless of how mercenaries might view things. Determined despite overwhelming odds, Douglas declares they will fight until literally the last man falls, even knowing they stand no real chance against the calamity. Wayne struggles internally, questioning what an ordinary player like himself could possibly do, unable to dismiss these NPCs' genuine feelings simply because it is technically a game. Sensing the lengthy discussion has dragged on too long, Douglas once again formally requests Wayne's crucial assistance in gathering enough defenders to protect the royal capital. Douglas asks whether Wayne could possibly use his safeholder information network to rally allies willing to help defend against the approaching calamity threat. Wayne admits he isn't particularly strong himself, gripping his fist tightly while acknowledging that gathering power to oppose the calamity ultimately requires trying something regardless. Determined despite his doubts, Wayne resolves to attempt assembling the most powerful people he knows, declaring firmly that they should simply give it a shot. Wayne and Gilgamesh stood inside the royal castle garden of the Kingdom of Hyers. Gilgamesh reminded him the real boss fight still remained ahead of them, and Wayne thanked him for stepping in first to convince the others. Amatane studied the destruction reports, admitting he once thought Wayne was merely exaggerating the threat, while Monkey Dive Sasuke remarked that an entire kingdom being wiped out proved this was no exaggeration at all. Yoichi grinned and admitted he believed the warning, since Gilgamesh himself vouched for it, while Country Pop, Mentalist, and Orinki stood nearby, each ready to join the growing coalition forming around Wayne's cause. A masked informant confirmed that Rare, winner of the last tournament, was hiding somewhere within the Great Lieb Forest, leaving Wayne stunned to realize every top-tier player in the region had gathered because of his call. Some fighters admitted they were never truly Rare's friends, since she was known as a player killer, who usually worked alone, yet everyone agreed having her fighting alongside them would drastically improve their chances of survival. The group turned to Wayne and declared him their leader, catching him off guard, while others accepted the decision and moved straight into planning their strategy against the coming threat. Gilgamesh explained that he was only repeating what had already been decided, while another comrade insisted they had all come specifically to support Wayne and back him up in this fight. Wayne argued he was not truly the one who gathered everyone, crediting Gilgamesh's early involvement as the true reason so many powerful allies had chosen to join their cause. Wayne realized they had all traveled here because they trusted his words, and he clenched his fist tightly, feeling the full weight of that responsibility settle upon him. Wayne declared he would take on the role of leader, and a nearby official expressed deep gratitude toward him, marveling that so many fighters had gathered for this dangerous mission. One soldier admitted they could not stand by and do nothing, praising Wayne for going this far to help even though none of them belonged to the Hyers Kingdom's own knights. An official revealed he had secured permission to use the kingdom's national treasure, since His Majesty himself ordered full assistance, and the sudden treasure's reveal left everyone present startled. Rare, disguised in flight, watched her ant army clash against tougher enemy soldiers, noting that even sniper headshots failed, while she wondered if the capital had sent unexpected reinforcements. Confused by how reinforcements had arrived despite only taking the neighboring city the day before, Rare speculated that the enemy must have employed some unconventional method to move so fast. Amid her hovering artillery ants, Rare vowed to retaliate even harder if the kingdom truly intended to send an army to subjugate her and end her growing rebellion. Worried that attacking the royal capital with the same overwhelming force used against La Colline would needlessly destroy the city, Rare instead considered deploying elite forces to spare the buildings while eliminating the people inside. Rare commanded her ant forces to pull back from the front lines while simultaneously summoning fresh reinforcements to her position for the next phase of battle. Praising her subordinates' effort, Rare ordered them to remain hidden within the forest, then unleashed a devastating attack herself, declaring there was no more need to hold back. Rare arrived above the breathtaking kingdom of Heist royal capital, admitting it would be blasphemy to reduce something so beautiful into ruins, yet still preparing for the imminent invasion. Hovering above the city with weapons drawn, Rare wondered aloud where she should strike first, feeling thrilled and fired up as the long-awaited confrontation began. Rare's own attack clanged backward against her, revealing that Yorowizuka-san's auto-intercept system had activated on its own, and Rare glared, demanding to know who had dared to strike her. Rare panicked, wondering how these players could possibly see her despite her active camouflage and flight skills working together, while a sharp-eyed swordsman noted she had unusually good eyes for spotting him. Furious at being detected so easily, Rare snarled at their nerve, gathering dark casting energy in her raised claws, as she prepared to unleash a devastating spell upon them all. Determined to focus, Rare decided the scattered resistance outside could wait until later, summoning something enormous from the ground while commanding it forward with one sharp word. Enormous adamant creatures crashed, and Rare instructed her newly summoned subordinates not to destroy any buildings, planning to use this captured capital as their main base. The towering adamant leader advanced heavily alongside its accompanying adamant knight, stepping through the ruined streets as terrified soldiers scattered before their overwhelming and unfamiliar monstrous presence within the city. Panicked citizens screamed and fled through the capital's streets, warning one another desperately that monsters had somehow broken into the city, spreading chaos throughout what was once a peaceful royal district. With her camouflage skill now exposed and rendered useless, Rare disabled it, declaring the capital was under her control, before shifting her attention toward the people still outside the walls. Rare mocked the approaching army, casually asking if she should turn every single one of them into pure experience points, as her monstrous forces closed in around the battlefield's edges. Players stared upward in disbelief at the massive creature's unfamiliar race, while Wayne recognized the towering being, calling it aloud as the very calamity everyone had been desperately searching for. The group realized this monstrous being was undoubtedly the event's final boss, the same creature that had summoned undead soldiers earlier, amazed it had reached the royal capital within only 2 days. Wayne's assembled fighters roared together, sticking to their carefully prepared plan while cheering that the long-awaited boss fight had arrived right before their very eyes. Rare noted that neither arrows nor magic ever managed to pierce through Yorowizuka's defenses, though she suspected the enemies were planning some clever tactical maneuver. 2 eager fighters grinned, one excited for the promised loot while another insisted that defeating this creature would surely make them the undisputed MVPs of the entire ongoing event. Though lamenting that Rare herself wasn't present here as an opponent, the group reassured each other that everyone gathered represented genuinely top-tier players, forming the strongest combined force ever assembled. Confident they had grown strong enough to overwhelm even a whole group of Rares combined, the fighters charged forward, unaware that the real Rare was already watching them. Rare mocked Wayne, questioning whether he truly believed he could actually defeat her, while Wayne vowed to show her their real difference in strength. Wayne warped beside Yorowizuka and unleashed a powerful slashing attack, catching Rare's monstrous armored form completely off guard as the blade connected with tremendous force. Gilgamesh grimaced, admitting the expensive shield he had purchased shattered apart from a single hit, though he reassured everyone nearby that he remained alive and still fighting. A healer stepped forward, casting regeneration and middle heal to restore Gilgamesh's strength, while Rare watched in shock, stunned her strike hadn't managed to finish him off. Wayne clenched his fist tightly and thanked his allies with gratitude, having survived Rare's devastating attack thanks to timely healing support from his teammates during the intense battle. Rare panicked internally upon realizing healing magic had already been discovered, wondering nervously whether someone had shared such crucial information publicly across forums or some similar community space. Rare assumed that being the event's top experience earner meant she alone understood most of the skill tree, deciding she should resume researching new skills once this event ended. A sudden lightning bolt struck Yorowizuka directly, though Rare initially dismissed the damage, believing her natural regeneration could easily heal it off before refocusing on the battle at hand. Startled that Yorowizuka had actually taken noticeable damage from mere players, Rare questioned aloud just how strong these particular fighters truly were, vowing angrily to crush them immediately. Wayne's allies successfully blinded Yorowizuka's vision using a well-timed attack, and Rare felt an ominous sense of dread while desperately trying to figure out what had happened to her sight. Reluctantly acknowledging she would damage her own subordinate significantly, Rare unleashed the devastating Hellflame spell anyway, feeling she had no other viable choice left in that critical moment. Wayne's allies scattered in panic, confused about the mysterious flame suddenly erupting around them, insisting loudly that nobody among their group had triggered such an unplanned and dangerous attack. Confused onlookers questioned whether Yorowizuka had accidentally self-destructed from blindness, realizing instead that the calamity itself had fired a wide-range spell directly upon its own position. Despite unleashing tremendous flames, capable of incinerating enemies, Rare remained troubled, noting with confusion that her vision stayed dark, despite the attack's obvious and overwhelming destructive power. A healer cast area, light heal across the battlefield, restoring everyone's health, while Rare watched, stunned her devastating Hellflame hadn't managed to kill a single one. Wayne credited their earlier field debuff setup for saving the entire group, admitting it had been annoying to prepare beforehand, though clearly worth every difficult moment of effort. Rare demanded furiously whether they had truly used a field debuff against her, while nearby allies worried nervously that this event boss might actually be a higher-tier AI. Realizing these players had deliberately weakened her strength, Rare admitted she foolishly assumed no one could ever defeat her, calling her own carelessness truly inexcusable now. Reflecting on her own overconfidence, Rare acknowledged that her arrogance had led to this humiliating outcome, clenching her fist while watching the battlefield unfold before her. Furious and unable to forgive herself, Rare nonetheless declared defiantly that she absolutely refused to lose against these persistent and surprisingly resourceful human opponents. Rare decided that if Yorowizuka couldn't see properly, she would let Kanzaki trample the players using their own remaining sight, instead commanding him forward through the storm. Fighters grew confused watching Yorowizuka's strange stumbling movements, wondering aloud what had happened to Kanzaki, before someone realized in shock that Yorowizuka had been afflicted by fear. A status window explained that Yorowizuka wasn't technically undead, though similar mental resistance rules still applied, and casting fear against homunculus golem hybrids required consuming stored soul energy instead. Rare realized she had never invested experience points into boosting Yorowizuka's or Kanzaki's mental stats, leaving them surprisingly vulnerable once the player's earlier field debuff weakened their natural resistance. Wone caster cried out that his soulstones had been consumed casting the spell, while Wayne marveled aloud at how impressively min-maxed their build must be to pierce an event boss's mental defenses. Realizing Yorowizuka was actually an undead-type existence, Rare frustratedly admitted this was yet another crucial piece of information about her own subordinates that she hadn't known beforehand. While the group focused their attacks onto Yorowizuka, Wayne calculated that at this current damage rate, the fear status would wear off before they could finish it. Furious that she had been reduced to such a pathetic state, Rare declared she could no longer allow this humiliation, unleashing a blinding white light without caring who witnessed her true form. Something massive stirred beneath the wreckage, its clawed hand grasping upward as players realized in alarm that the boss's terrifying second form was finally beginning to emerge before them. Feathers scattered through the air as a winged figure rose from the destruction, radiating overwhelming presence, while the monstrous armored form crouched watchfully just behind her transformed silhouette. Startled fighters stared upward at the winged silhouette descending toward them, one of them whispering uncertainly whether the graceful figure appearing before them could truly be an actual angel. Rare's expression shifted coldly as she studied the fighters below her, her feathered wings framing a face that no longer held any trace of her earlier composed confidence. Declaring she would now crush every single one of them using her full remaining power, Rare's serious mode fully activated, revealing her long-hidden and far more dangerous second form. Rare revealed her true winged form during the fierce ongoing struggle, standing before her transformed monstrous subordinate, as the battlefield watched her newfound overwhelming presence unfold. Rare struggled with poor eyesight sensitivity, realizing harsh sunlight, combined with her albinism trait severely impaired her vision, admitting she couldn't even aim her magic under such conditions. Watching Rare's winged silhouette, the players wondered aloud whether this angelic figure was truly the mastermind responsible for orchestrating the entire ongoing undead outbreak plaguing their kingdom. Wayne realized the soulstone had been completely consumed casting fear, concluding this monstrous entity was definitely undead, and most likely represented an angel that had since become corrupted. Rare mocked the fighters for standing carelessly before her, despite having stolen her vision and restricted her movements earlier, declaring calmly that she would now jump straight into action. Diving downward with a devastating kick, Rare vowed to make the fighters regret letting their guard down, striking hard against them with sudden overwhelming force and speed. Startled fighters realized this transformed creature was far stronger than its appearance suggested, shouting warnings to each other as Rare's attacks began overwhelming their defensive formation. Confused fighters wondered how the creature could move, despite being frozen by fear, questioning aloud why this seemingly bare-handed angel of death fought unlike a typical magic specialist. Wayne theorized that Rare must have shed her outer shell specifically to nullify the lingering debuffs affecting her, attributing this sudden mobility entirely to some form of molting process. Rare explained that the fear status had only ever affected Yorowizuka, and once she personally escaped its range, the debilitating effect stopped applying to her. One fighter charged forward, buying precious time for the caster to recast darkness once more, hoping to reapply the crucial debuff against Rare before she could retaliate. Declaring it was already too late for their plan, Rare unleashed a massive magical circle beneath her feet, startling the fighters as her true offensive power began manifesting. Crackling orbs of energy gathered around Rare's outstretched form, her expression turning fiercely determined as she prepared to unleash a devastating widespread magical assault against them all. Rare unleashed her lightning shower spell, sending thunderous bolts crashing down across the battlefield, striking multiple fighters simultaneously as explosive booms echoed violently throughout the ruined landscape. Among the fallen, Mentalist lay defeated, and Rare noted calmly she could now track the remaining fighters simply by listening to the direction of their scattered voices. Confident she no longer needed risky close combat, Rare decided to wipe out the entire area where those voices originated using a wide, devastating area of effect attack instead. Wayne ordered everyone to regroup and stick to their original plan, commanding the frontliners to close distance and prevent the boss from relocating away from that spot. Determined to intercept Rare's incoming attack, one knight charged forward, shouting for his allies to leave the dangerous confrontation entirely to him. As she bore down, Rare's powerful strike connected with tremendous force, sending the intercepting knight crashing backward as the impact echoed across the battle-torn terrain surrounding them all. Multiple fighters launched coordinated attacks from every direction, forcing Rare to grumble in visible frustration, admitting these persistent and increasingly troublesome opponents were proving far harder to handle. Cursing under her breath, Rare unleashed her powerful snowstorm spell as a counterattack. While fighters noticed, she kept spamming devastating AoE magic. Once the massive blizzard settled, Rare stood visibly worn out among the surviving fighters, her strength clearly draining from casting such relentless area of effect attacks. Surveying the aftermath, one fighter realized everyone who charged into melee range had died, questioning aloud exactly how many of their allies still remained standing. Despite the staggering casualties, Wayne firmly refused to retreat, insisting they must keep pushing forward into melee range no matter how costly the ongoing confrontation had become. Wayne urged everyone to keep denying Rare any alternative attack options, forcing her to continue relying on self-destructive AoE spells until they could wear her down and create an opening. Rare noted irritably that the commanding voice belonged to their leader. Admitting his presence was clearly what made this group's teamwork frustratingly tight and difficult to break apart. Wayne warped toward Rare using his warp skill, closing the distance while his allies watched in surprise as he launched himself straight into her defenses. Wayne shouted triumphantly upon reaching Rare, while she reacted swiftly to his sudden appearance, both combatants bracing themselves for an intense close-range clash between them. Rare's claws struck, and a devastating blow pierced straight through Wayne's body, leaving his allies stunned as the pivotal clash reached its brutal and unexpected turning point. Amid the raging battle, a decisive turning point arrived when a massive sword speared into the earth beside the enemy leader's fallen body, leaving onlookers frozen in silence. Rare seized the enemy leader by the collar, her expression cold and unreadable, while his terrified subordinates screamed out for their fallen commander in horror. The leader groaned in pain as Rare's grip tightened further, and moments later his body went limp, prompting her to declare that crushing him would shatter their coordination. Growing impatient, Rare glared down at the twitching leader and demanded he simply respawn and vanish already, since his lingering presence was only getting in her way. Suddenly a hail of arrows rained down around her, and Rare realized with alarm that a distant archer was precisely targeting every opening in her guard. A masked assassin lunged in close, hurling a squid ink bomb that struck true, gleefully confirming the attack would plunge her back into the debilitating darkness condition. Buried under a storm of arrows while still clutching the leader as a shield, Rare smirked and mused that apparently this stolen body could still be useful. Enemies watching in horror saw their leader used as a living shield as Rare unleashed a scorching lightning shower, forcing the enemy healer to cast area, light heal. Exhausted, the healer admitted her spells could not last much longer, prompting an ally to insist they strike now. While Wayne still held the line, Rare noticed her own life points steadily draining and wondered if a lingering debuff was the cause, since her skin had been tingling strangely for some time. Realizing the enemy only had one healer sustaining them all, Rare decided to overwhelm that single caster with more damage than her healing could ever handle. Rare unleashed a devastating combination of spells at once, calling out Prominence, Earthquake, and Hurricane, as the battlefield shattered violently beneath her overwhelming magical assault. Screaming through the chaos, Rare declared she would gladly serve them a full course of area of effect magic, even if unleashing it meant destroying herself in the process. Though the healer desperately cast Middle Heal and Area Light Heal together, Rare's Ignite spell struck first, mocking that such sluggish healing would get her wiped out instantly. As the dust and smoke finally settled across the ravaged battlefield, Rare stood alone amid the wreckage, letting out a slow, satisfied laugh at her overwhelming victory. Laughing triumphantly, Rare announced that she had completely wiped out the enemy vanguard, boasting that only weak stragglers remained in their retreating rear guard now. Before she could celebrate, a powerful hand seized her, and Rare realized in shock that the tank she had slashed earlier had survived her whole storm of attacks. Rare realized the healer had focused solely on keeping this one tank alive, abandoning every other ally, while he growled that he had finally caught her, at last. Behind him, a small mage raised her hands and unleashed a concentrated burst of magic, sending shattering waves of energy, crashing violently across the battlefield toward Rare. Rare felt her strength drain away without warning, gasping in confusion as her body finally gave out, and she collapsed, staring in disbelief at the tank before her. Confused enemies stared at the tank's motionless body, questioning aloud whether his life points had truly hit zero, wondering what had triggered such a sudden and unexpected collapse. Rare realized in horror that the strange item had drained the life points of every target caught within its range, permanently reducing her own maximum life points as well. Burning from the lingering albinism damage, Rare admitted this residual injury alone could finish her off, forcing her to move immediately before the battlefield closed in further. Rare finally understood why the fallen enemies hadn't respawned immediately, realizing their scattered corpses now blocked her path and made walking through the wreckage impossible. Unable to walk properly through the tangled bodies, Rare spread her wings and decided flying away was now her only remaining option to escape. Startled soldiers shouted for someone like her to run away, while Rare kicked one attacker aside and forced her way upward through the storm of chaos. Reaching a clearing in the sky, Rare muttered in frustration that she would simply use magic to destroy the corpse and erase the evidence entirely. Before she could finish the spell, a familiar voice cut through the silence, and Rare froze in recognition, whispering with dread that it was truly him again. Rare crashed to the ground, screaming as the skeletal armored figure loomed closer, its blade poised to strike, while she scrambled backward in helpless terror. The clattering skeleton suddenly collapsed into scattered bones beside her, and Rare sat frozen on the empty plaza, staring blankly as the world fell eerily silent around her. The castle stood quiet as onlookers murmured that the monster had simply disappeared, while deep inside the throne room a hooded figure remained motionless upon the shattered dais. A resurrection prompt appeared before the throne, asking whether Rare wished to respawn immediately within the hour without losing any experience, thanks to the ongoing special event. Light enveloped the platform as Rare materialized back atop the throne, her horns and pale hair catching the glow while confusion still lingered across her expression. A cat-like subordinate asked what had happened to her, but Rare only stared ahead in silence, murmuring quietly that no one else was actually here with her. Realizing the throne room stood completely empty, Rare admitted aloud that she had died, then understood that NPCs cannot respawn instantly since they cannot receive system messages. Checking her subordinate list, Rare found every single name marked dead, confirming that because their master had fallen, all of her followers had perished right alongside her. Left sitting alone atop the throne for a full hour, Rare wondered quietly whether Carrie and the others were doing fine after dying so suddenly together. Reflecting on her reckless overconfidence, Rare admitted that assuming she understood the game best, while neglecting to gather proper information had led directly to her spectacular defeat. She noted that thanks to the ongoing special event's mercy, she had narrowly avoided losing 10% of her total experience as the usual death penalty demanded. Rare acknowledged just how fortunate this outcome truly was, since losing that much experience could have devastated both herself and the costly world tree she nurtured. Determined not to repeat such a costly mistake, Rare resolved that from now on she would always keep a 10% experience reserve set carefully aside. She reasoned that if she simply avoided losing battles altogether, she would never have to worry about suffering any death penalties in the first place again. Back on the battlefield, the armored figure declared humanity's time to face him had finally arrived, while Rare vowed she would crush them all with her full power. Overwhelmed by grief and frustration, Rare pressed her hand to her face as tears spilled freely, her composure finally breaking under the weight of everything that had happened. Elsewhere, a wounded figure lay recovering quietly in bed within a peaceful town, the distant castle and countryside stretching calmly beyond the window as time slowly passed. The young man jolted awake with a startled gasp, desperately asking whether they had actually won as his companions gathered anxiously around his bedside in relief. His comrades confirmed that the subjugation had indeed succeeded, clasping his hand in celebration and urging him to come along and reunite with everyone waiting outside. Back at the castle gates, fellow soldiers welcomed their leader, and he bowed, expressing heartfelt gratitude to everyone who had fought bravely alongside him. A masked ally thanked the nameless elf softly, and Wayne admitted he hadn't fought such a heated battle in a long while, thanking everyone for calling him. Survivors realized their rear guard of 30 people had been thinned down brutally, with less than a third managing to survive the chaotic and costly encounter. The plan had assumed the vanguard would die in exchange, though several admitted that losing so many people from the rear guard still felt genuinely crazy. Wayne mentioned the mentalist had likely respawned back in his original town by now, since overriding a respawn point during such uncertainty would have been far too risky. Surprised onlookers realized fallen players had probably all respawned safely in their original towns, unaware that anyone had returned to the battlefield unexpectedly at all. The hooded mentalist revealed he had actually overwritten his respawn point to the royal capital beforehand, startling the nearby elf who hadn't expected him to return. Since he no longer needed his old respawn town, the mentalist reassured everyone they needn't worry about, repaying him with any especially amazing promised reward. Wayne worried aloud that without proper repayment, he couldn't fulfill the generous reward he had promised to everyone who had fought so hard together. The group reasoned that simply getting the chance to fight a rare event boss was reward enough, especially after splitting valuable experience points among 30 grateful players. Wayne quietly admitted he had personally thanked everyone in his heart, grateful beyond words for the friends who had answered his call and fought beside him. Afterward, the mentalist theorized aloud that the strange boss they'd fought must have actually been some kind of powerful undead angel in disguise. Wayne recalled saying something similar mid-battle, noting that the National Treasure artifact worked despite normally being weaker against angels, which was suspicious in itself. He explained the Soulstone artifact, which specifically allows mental magic to affect undead-type monsters, had clearly been consumed during the fight as solid evidence. The artifact, called Heart of the Spirit Lord, permanently weakened all entities nearby for an hour, its effect intensifying dramatically for 10 seconds once destroyed. Realizing they could no longer rely on that same artifact from the Prime Minister, the group groaned at the thought of ever facing that boss again. If the creature truly was undead, the mentalist warned it might resurface again during some future revival event, forcing them to prepare more carefully. Wayne resolved that if such a fight ever came again, they would need to significantly improve their skills without depending on borrowed magical artifacts, despite the danger. Wayne admitted quietly that if that day ever came, he would still want to fight alongside these same companions once more. Left behind as everyone dispersed, Wayne playfully asked the mentalist about his plans, questioning whether the man intended on sticking around any longer with them. The mentalist confirmed he had overwritten his respawn point to the royal capital, prompting the masked ally to suggest that Wayne remain their group's leader going forward. High above the battlefield, Rare descended with massive angelic wings spread wide, her cold expression prompting terrified onlookers to whisper that the calamity had truly arrived. She sighed that continuing this fight now felt like bullying the weak, calling it disappointing as her outmatched opponents once again stared straight into despair. Rare finally lets her guard down after suffering her first true defeat, quietly relieved that Carrie and the others never witnessed her looking so shaken. Her mind drifts back to an old memory of her sister, suddenly leaving home, realizing this crushing sorrow hits just as hard as that abandonment once did. She reflects on Wayne, insisting his death was never his fault, admitting instead that her own overconfidence was the true reason behind this humiliating loss. Despite the crushing defeat, Rare recognizes her accumulated experience points likely rank among the highest of every player currently active inside the entire game world. She recalls deliberately choosing albinism and poor eyesight as starting drawbacks, gambling for extra experience points instead of the standard 100 every other player received. Those two chosen weaknesses together granted her an additional 50 experience points, a modest bonus that ultimately shaped the remarkable existence she would eventually become. That small 50-point gain let her meet the requirements for the hidden subordinate skill, the very ability that marked the true beginning of her rise. She reasons that in this game, everyone constantly chases experience points, because gathering enough of them can unlock possibilities most players never even imagine reaching. Experience points function much like gold or jewels do back in the real world, holding the same tempting power over anyone who gathers enough of it. Having amassed an overwhelming stockpile of experience points, Rare admits she became infatuated, understanding clearly how such a massive fortune can easily lead people astray. Clenching her fist with resolve, Rare reminds herself greed must never win, vowing to spend her points wisely instead of being bewitched by golden experience. Tapping through her menu, she considers acquiring a new skill to negate her drawbacks, planning first to use experience gained from destroying 3 entire towns. Unable to forgive those responsible for killing her once before, Rare decides she must also raise her raw combat strength before confronting them again directly. This time, she silently promises herself she will be fully prepared, determined that her revenge against her former killers will not fail a second time. A loud impact echoes suddenly through the sky as Rare's expression hardens, her winged silhouette descending swiftly and directly toward the knights waiting below. One knight closes his eyes, explaining a skill that reveals dense mana clusters within living things, while sensing demonic eyes could perceive mana across his surroundings. Grinning, that same knight realizes he might try wielding demonic eyes himself, hoping it could compensate for his troublesome poor eyesight without needing visible light. Confusion spreads among the knights, certain they had already struck her down completely, yet Rare reappears bearing noticeably more wings, clearly far stronger than before. One knight panics, questioning aloud whether the destruction of Hyre's kingdom was truly part of some larger event, unable to accept what he is witnessing unfold. Another realizes this event may have been designed all along to reveal her awakening, rather than subjugate the calamity, intending instead to introduce a new boss. A shimmering, discerning feather barrier flares overhead as Rare hovers above the battlefield, feathers drifting down while the confused knights below brace themselves. One knight wonders aloud whether arrows will fly at them again this time, while another anxiously asks where the rest of their scattered companions currently are. Suspecting this entire encounter might be a scripted loss, the knights decide to gather as much information as possible before Rare suddenly smiles down at them. Rare offers a little chat if they refuse to attack, but the knight dismisses her outright, refusing to reveal anything about their earlier debuff field tactic. coldly declaring she'll finish them off and seize the royal capital. Rare pauses when an enormous marching army suddenly appears cresting the distant horizon toward them. The Prime Minister apparently arranged reinforcements, as the approaching soldiers turn out to be the knights of the royal capital, arriving in overwhelming numbers. Rare remarks on the impressive turnout, folding her wings calmly as she declares this gathering more than sufficient, before announcing her long-awaited revenge shall begin. Her wings unleash the devastating feather gatling skill, firing countless bullets that tear through the battlefield, stunning knights who insist she never attacked this way before. Rare admits she only meant this assault as a simple warm-up, yet it ended up eliminating far more soldiers than she had originally anticipated happening. She calls it pathetic dying from such a weak attack, admitting she still has plenty of new skills to try, preferring they not die instantly. A massive dark implosion begins forming as knights nervously question the strange dark orb, unaware that Rare warns them the true main event is only starting. The dark sphere violently expands outward, knights crying out in shock and pain as the crushing implosion catches soldiers completely off guard across the field. The darkness swallows entire ranks of knights before vanishing without a trace, leaving survivors staring in disbelief at where their comrades had just disappeared. Rare notes how convenient this new combo is, explaining her demonic eyes combined with link magic lets her cast powerful spells without speaking a single word. Watching helplessly, the knights realize she has become completely powered up now, cursing under their breath about facing this relentless calamity they can barely comprehend. Rare warns that her revenge has only just begun, adding it would be a real problem if something this small already impressed them so much. A brilliant beam of light erupts from her position, slamming into scattered knights across the battlefield, while horrified survivors watch the overwhelming devastation unfold before them. Grinning, Rare launches another attack skyward, and moments later a distant city erupts, smoke and destruction spreading across its skyline below. One knight groans in pain as Rare calmly floats beside another winged companion, both hovering silently above the wreckage left behind from her assault. Teasing his stubborn silence, Rare asks if he is fine not using that debuff field trick again, wondering aloud if he even intends to resist her now. Rare mocks him for seeking answers after refusing her own earlier questions, calling it selfish before finally agreeing to answer his question about the royal capital. She confesses she wants the capital simply because it is beautiful, declaring something so beautiful must belong entirely to her, leaving the knight visibly stunned. Rare vows to fill that beautiful city with her undead, ignoring his glaring protest about its people, insisting their opinions mean absolutely nothing to her. She declares she will take everything she desires while eliminating anyone who dares stand in her way, calling this her official declaration of war. Bidding farewell, Rare tells him to warn the others to wait for her, revealing she intends to hunt down and kill everyone from before eventually. A massive explosion rips through the landscape, as Rare declares it is time to trample the city, marking the true beginning of her invasion. Startled by sudden notifications, Rare realizes her subordinates Carrie, Sue, and Deus have all managed to resurrect already, surprised an entire hour has already passed. Deus panics after their sudden deaths, demanding to know where Rare currently is, while she apologizes calmly for their unexpected and abrupt elimination earlier. Deus questions what she could possibly be thinking after perishing mere moments ago, and Rare casually reveals she is now already at the royal capital. Rare insists she still intends to seize the capital, refusing to abandon her plans, simply because of one earlier defeat, pleased he seems to understand. She instructs Carrie and the others to head toward the volcano area to keep gathering information, while she summons the Adamant Squad to help here. Reasoning that coordinated players could still threaten her alone, Rare decides to crush enemy respawn points first, then suggests they locate an inn together. She admits things might differ if monster side players coordinated with her directly, insisting quietly that she does actually have a few real friends somewhere, reassuring herself it is fine even without close friends. Rare notes she still commands powerful minions, capable of handling whatever challenges lie ahead of her. She entrusts Sieg with command of the newly summoned Adamant Squad, instructing him to summon additional skeletons to help advance their ongoing suppression efforts. Sieg orders the skeleton troops to focus entirely on taking control of the city, telling them to ignore any fleeing enemies escaping on horseback. Rare tells Sieg she will leave governance of the royal capital to him, and he respectfully acknowledges her decision with a simple, confident reply. Dia suddenly appears, having been summoned as equipment carried atop a skeleton's back, prompting surprised questions about whether such a method is even permitted. Dias declares he must use everything available to reach Her Majesty's side, clenching his fist, despite admitting she never actually summoned him herself. Watching this unfold, Rare notes these NPCs adapt to ambiguous commands much like humans do, finding it interesting how they interpret her orders creatively. Rare sighs, admitting there is nothing left to do now that Diaz has arrived, and the three of them set off together to storm the castle, declaring they're only a little further from checkmate.